Briley Parkway, we've got a crash on the right shoulder at County Hospital Road. TDOT reporting that. Also, look for the eastern split where a vehicle is stalled on the off-ramp. That's to go eastbound to I-2440 from 40 eastbound. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome one, welcome all to the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. I'm filling in for Matt. We had a good time last Friday. We're going to have a good time today. 4 hours of opinion-driven content. Hopefully something that's useful for you. I was watching the Dow Jones Industrial Average down, we'll call it 350 points. It certainly slowed the hemorrhaging today, but still not positive news. What was fascinating today, and I was watching it in real time, it happened around 10:30 in a matter of minutes. The stock market on rumors that President Trump, rumors, these are internet rumors, folks, that President Trump was going to pause the tariffs for 90 days, the market had a 2,000-point swing. It went way up and then boom, dropped right back down based on an internet rumor. That's how much the current market issues are being driven by the tariff discussion, is that even a rumor of pause is enough to cause these markets to recover. So that tells me that there's a lot of dry powder on the sideline saying, you know what, we're ready to buy. We see some value here. But this tariff stuff's got them all skittish. So we'll talk about that. We'll get to it. I know that's on the top of everybody's mind. So I'll honor that. 615-737-9986. That's the Super Talk text line. It's where you can weigh in, where you can call in and be a part of the show. I can tell you what I think. I have lots of opinions. You can read them over at the Tennessean and check them out there. I always appreciate it when you do. When you tell me I'm right, you tell me I'm wrong. But it's more fun when I get your feedback. And last Friday, y'all were helping me kind of chew through the tariff stuff, the good, the bad, the ugly. I absolutely think it is a radical economic theory. The question is, will it ultimately pan out? Is it true that it's just some short-term pain, but ultimately we'll all be better off? I don't know. I definitely want to hear what you think on that. As I start every show that I fill in, I want to let folks know the basics. We've got Chris Weber behind the highly reflected glass these days, so I can see looks like a ghost back there, really.
Are you sure I'm here?
You know, brother, I sure hope you're there, because if not, I'm going to have to start pressing buttons, and that cackle you hear is Ken Weaver.
Howdy, boys.
He's got it all, and he's got the best of all the people here. He says, Super Talk.
Super Talk.
Better than anybody. So thanks to those guys. My day job, as many of you know, but I want to make sure everybody knows where I'm coming from, is over at Thanks, where we have a team that helps you grow a business with gratitude. They are gracious enough to let me spend some of my time here. As I mentioned, I'm on the Tennessean editorial board, and I know it may shock some of you guys to learn that there's a conservative writing over the Tennessean, but I've been doing that for a while now, and when y'all stumble upon it, it is hilarious, because the email that I get from you is, I never knew there was anybody over there that put out opinions that I agreed with. So thank you for reading and corresponding with me at D. Cameron Smith on X. That's a great way, I think, to have timely conversations on all this stuff. At D as in David, Cameron Smith on X. And then one of these days, we're getting better at hashtag TN Politics. Just do it. If you have something you want to share with the group, hashtag TN Politics. It's a great way to follow the discussion, something I'm super excited about. I want to, say a special thank you to my friends in Nolensville. That's where I hail from, where we get stuck behind tractors periodically on the road. It's very exciting. There are many cows, some longhorns, one emu. There used to be zebras and camels on the way home. That was really entertaining.
Really?
Yeah. Well, there all kinds of wild things happen in Nolensville. So just saying hi over there. And again, as I announced on Friday, we've got an opening at Nolensville High School. If you are the best football coach in the state and you feel like you would like to come to our community, we will show up on Fridays and we will cheer. And it's only somewhat unclear how many people are cheering on the team versus the band.
Yeah, but is he going to make the players run sprints?
And if you don't, then I don't want you. I don't want any.
All right.
You're laughing, but you know the truth. I don't want any of this soft stuff.
No.
Right? I'm raising young men. I will have 4 in the high school next year. 4.
Give them gassers, coach.
Yeah, gassers, and you better get on it. I don't want this easy stuff. I want them to learn to do hard things. If you ask them how they're feeling about it, what is this, ballet? Like, come on. We got to stop that.
One thing that has changed for the better since the 80s is at least the coaches give you a drink of water now during practice.
Yes, I remember this was a thing that was fading during my tenure at Brentwood Academy, but they had leftover salt pills that you could, they were like these orange tablets we just found laying around, and we're like, these will probably help.
Yeah.
This will do the trick.
Yes, and like they taste kind of salty. It's because they're leftover salt pills. And it was, if you're good, at 2676 says, I have no idea how to play football, but I can be mean to kids. And that's half the battle.
Is that Matt Murphy?
It may be. It may not be. I'll put it this way. It's important that we build a generation of resilient kids, and they ain't there right now. So if they can experience some sprints, some heat, some adversity, this is what helps do that. And actually, what was kind of hilarious is, and this goes to actually with the tariff discussion, is we bought at our house, my wife and I were like, these guys, it's getting kind of meaty in here. A lot of testosterone, a lot of stuff going on. We got to burn off some of this energy. So we bought basically a home gym that was a Rogue home gym, Rogue Fitness. And I am not a paid spokesman for these guys, but good grief. I mean, the quality of this stuff is like industrial. It is serious.
Heavy duty, huh?
Yes, we spent all day, hours and hours with 6 of us trying to put this thing together. And we got it done. But to all of y'all out there, especially on Friday, who are saying, hey, American-made matters, you bet it does. And guess what? The sticker shock on that piece of equipment is there too. And I think that that's something that, even as I talk about free markets and open trade, and I'm old school, so I'm looking at Reagan, Thomas Sowell, even the new school guys, Ben Shapiro, those folks, Ted Cruz, saying, wait, we got to be real careful with this. That's where I fall. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to buy American. In fact, I'm actually doing that right now. But I know in certain areas I want to buy American because it's quality. It's excellently built. And that's where it matters. But on something like, I always use socks, but like even coffee, I'm not like, well, I'm sorry, this is Brazilian, not Colombian. I'm more like, is it drinkable? Okay, cool. And I don't really care. So I think that for me is where there's the opportunity to buy American, I want to, especially small businesses in my community. And I know all of y'all from the different communities around the listening area, you want to support your folks there, right? That's a good thing. We shouldn't get away from that. But the idea of having the government manipulate the economy, the government get in and tell you by sending its own price signals to you, you can have this and not that. You must shop here and not there. I'm an old school conservative in this regard. Like I don't like that idea at all, regardless of the mechanism. And I think the ultimate way to be is no tariffs, no barriers to trade, let everybody compete, because when we compete, one, a lot of American companies can win, and they win in areas that we care about. We are the largest exporter of services in the world. So I think we have to be careful about this idea of, well, we just manufacturing. That's the only thing. We must go back to old school manufacturing. Okay, in some areas that makes sense. And one of the areas where you guys educated me on Friday was, well, hey, don't you think there's some utility here in being a little tougher on China and pushing back on them? Well, yeah, if there's a strategic reason, I can see some strategic utility of, we don't want to be dependent on China for certain things, particularly not things that impact our day-to-day livelihood. That's something that very much concerns me, and it probably concerns a lot of y'all too. And I think there's a strategic case for that. But as I mentioned on Friday, when we have these strategic cases and say, hey, China is not being a good faith actor, they're not engaging us in a way that's mutually beneficial. Now what we need is the network of countries around them that have some capacities that we don't. And we need to have good relationships with them. And I think that's probably getting us there. John in Lawrenceburg is still hung up on my football conversation. I would have them all running sprints in the off-season workouts with puking and all. I could do it, but you couldn't handle the truth. Plus, a lot of them would probably quit. I thought that, guys, we can get back to tariffs. I thought that was the idea. I thought that they were trying to make you quit, and the ones that stayed really wanted to play.
Waiting them out.
That's a good point.
Right. I don't. Everybody gets a trophy culture. Oh, my goodness. Just stop it. Like, I'm glad your kid played T-ball and learned to run to all the bases. Do they need a trophy for that, or is it just intrinsically fun for them? I mean, I have just seen so much of my mommy says I'm special that I want to die. You need to stop. Like, you are alive, and I'm glad your mama loves you. But there are 1,000 other kids that want it too. The only difference is how hard you work. And work right now is sort of like, is there an easier way? We need to get over that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't like that at all. But John would take care of it. He'd make them throw up. But, I've got a monster, workout machine in my garage now. We got some heavy tires. Thanks to the listening audience. They said they had leftover tires. I went and got them, pressure washed them off. And now my boys get the benefit of flipping these things all over the place.
Big old tractor tires?
Oh, yeah, the big ones.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I actually bought a harness. I hadn't fully figured out how to build it, but I want to do it so they have to drag the tires.
Oh, yeah, put the harness on and then run with it.
Right, the tires behind you, and I'm just like, I feel like this is going to destroy my lawn. And so I haven't.
It would, yeah.
Have not worked through all the details there, but I will.
Well, just have them break you a garden there, Brother Cameron.
If I should just hook them up to a plow, Ken. You're evolving this in ways that I think are really, really beneficial. And my boys, if they're listening, are like, oh, no, stop giving him ideas. Please stop. We need to stop. We need to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Direct U.S. talks with Iran. Details coming up at 3:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt, who, as we all know, because I mentioned this on Friday, is doing intersex banner twirling. He says that it's just a great stress relief, and I believe him. He's that kind of guy. He's trying to be very progressive. He's not on the air, so in his life he tries to shake it up a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Just kind of balance things out.
Yeah, balance is key. Mm-hmm. It's key, really. So while we were off air, I was looking at Trump's approval ratings, trying to get a sense of where he was. He was actually doing really well. I don't see much polling that pulls in the last 3 market days. I saw these protests, and I was following this, the hands-off protests, which oddly is how Democrats and liberals protest both abortion and the bureaucracy, which is very, very strange to me. It is hands off my lady parts and then hands off my government. And they use the exact same chants and everything for both. And I was confused by this. I'll admit, I'm terrible at protest. I'm terrible because even as an opinion columnist and talk radio guy, I'm just not sure how much people want to hear me yell at them. And that's when I see these protests, and it's probably good for the domestic paper industry. Lots of poster board, lots of signage that a lot of it's not very well made. I'll just be honest. But I look at the pictures and they're telling me, well, these protests are huge around the country. People wanted the hands off of what? Well, we don't want cuts to the bureaucracy. Okay. We don't like this deportation. So basically this is a hands-off demonstration for more than 1,200 locations in 50 states by 150 groups, and it's basically saying we are Democrats. Which, look, if that's your thing and that's how you want to do it, more power to you. But I keep wanting to hear the opposite plan. Like, okay, you don't like this. You don't like Elon Musk and Doge. You don't like the immigration enforcement. What is the plan? Because if the plan was we're going to do nothing, then hands off kind of, it suggests that, right? Hands off is, hey, don't touch it. It was great the way it was. Then Democrats just lost to Trump on that. And again, I want to remind people that Trump is not this candidate that, I know MAGA feels this way, that he is just this magical candidate who is unique among men and all of this stuff, but eminently beatable by a rank and file Democrat. Or I won't even say beatable. You have a competitive race because the country's still split politically. You might want to call it 55-45 right now, but it's not the case that everybody's a Republican now and Trump is in the 80s approval. That's just not it. So Democrats basically are saying our big takeaway from all this, in a race where if we had a candidate who wasn't a brain dead body, that they could be competitive, they're saying, well, you know what? No. We think that the way things are going is great. We should continue going that way. And if we do, we'll be in great shape. And that is just the worst alternative to the American people. If you don't like the way that Trump's going, then offer something different. The not Trump thing, and Republicans learned this when Obama got a second term. Mitt Romney should have won that race based on the economic indicators. But the entire race, and Romney had his own flaws, but the entire race was not Obama. And that's what Democrats are really doing to Trump right now is, well, our big game plan here, after much research and development and focus groups, is not Trump. Yay. And this is where I've actually taken exception to some of the readers of my content over at the Tennessean and pointed out, wait a minute, you keep telling me about due process and all these things, and you're saying I don't believe in due process anymore because I support what Doge is doing, because I think we should enforce immigration law. And so therefore I am now a scofflaw. I no longer believe in the rule of law. I've abdicated it in favor of the petty tyrant. That's a lot of the feedback I got. And my response to that was, well, I guess we'll have to talk about it on the other side of the break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
.30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Expecting sunshine for the next couple of days, but chilly nights. Tell you about it during the full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. President Trump says there will be what he calls high-level talks with Iran starting on Saturday. The U.S. Supreme Court has paused tonight's midnight deadline for the Trump administration to return a man they say they mistakenly deported to a prison in El Salvador. And as for tariffs, some Republicans in the U.S. Senate want to try to limit a president's authority. Here's Karen Travers.
President Trump would veto a bipartisan bill in the Senate that aims to rein in his authority to impose tariffs. The legislation would require the president to notify Congress of new tariffs and require Congress to vote to approve those tariffs within 60 days of their issuance. A White House statement sent to Senate Republicans and obtained by ABC News says, quote, if passed, this bill would dangerously hamper the president's authority and duty to determine our foreign policy and protect our national security.
President Trump threatening China with an additional 50% tariff for the 34% tariff China slapped on the U.S. last night. Tennessee lawmakers close to passing illegal immigration legislation. A bill that allows school districts to refuse to enroll illegal immigrant children has one more hurdle, and they could clear that today. And a bill that establishes a list of out-of-state driver's licenses issued to undocumented people that will be invalid in Tennessee could go to Governor Lee's desk if it passes the state Senate as early as today. And as a week-long nationwide boycott of Walmart has begun, the company announcing a response, says Chuck Severson.
The boycott of Walmart is organized by the People's Union USA over the big retailer's rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, or DEI. Walmart announces it's working with other leading corporations, including Verizon, Blackstone, and PepsiCo, and given a grant toward a new website, skillsfirst.org, listing requirements for 9 of the most common U.S. jobs to help job seekers and employers that don't necessarily need a college degree.
That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News. The Gulch got a crash blocking the right lane, 40 eastbound at Broadway. And Briley Parkway at County Hospital Road, we've got the right shoulder blocked by a crash there. Over at the Eastern Split, the off-ramp partially blocked from 40 eastbound at 224. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back to the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in while Matt does his intersex competitive banner twirling. It's funny every time I say it. It's also facts. He texted me the other day and said, please let people know. And I said, okay. I didn't want to be the kind of guy that doesn't communicate when I've got a giant megaphone in front of my face. So one of the things that I've been getting picked on lately for is when I've written a couple columns over at the Tennessean that talk about the necessity of what DOJ is doing in canceling government contracts, reining in the bureaucracy, that kind of stuff. I also supported enforcement of immigration law. I've said, I was talking specifically about the Tren de Aragua gang deportations, but saying that, hey, the Trump administration is looking at their legal authority here, saying we believe under the law and the Constitution we have it, and they're using it. To which my readers who are less conservative point out, well, you just don't love due process anymore. Cameron, we thought you loved due process. And now you've folded up your tent and you've said you're just like everybody else, jumping into bed with the wild Trump administration. So I want to address that, and this may be a useful conversation for those of you listening right now who hear this a lot, because the hands-off protesters, they wanted to talk about this. Well, due process. What about this? What about that? The Fifth Amendment says the federal government shall deprive no one of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. The Constitution actually says one command only twice, and it's due process. The 14th Amendment incorporated that same idea to make sure that the states were included in that. But it's a process. It's what we would describe as legality or operating within the law, and it's a process. It's not a final destination. And what's happened is a lot of folks that are screaming about due process is they're really saying they don't like the conclusion. They don't like the action of the executive branch. They said, well, ultimately the courts decide. That's true, but the courts don't decide out of the gate. It's not the case that the president or members of Congress call up the Supreme Court and say, hey, we're thinking about doing something. What do you think? What would you do? That would be weird, because then we would not have separate branches of government. And notice I said separate branches. I did not say co-equal branches. The design of the founders was that Congress would be the most powerful branch, followed by the executive, and then the judicial kind of just sorts it out. And we've messed that up. We can talk about why. You can join the conversation, 615-737-9986. But part of the problem here is who speaks for the Constitution? When we're making a law or a prosecutorial decision or a regulation, who carries the weight of the Constitution? And the answer, very simply, is all branches of government. That's a gating exercise for anybody who, frankly, is an American. Forget conservative or liberal. But if I'm working in government, which I have, I've worked in the House, the Senate, I've seen this stuff, the first thing should be, is this constitutional? Do we have the authority to act in the space? And if the answer is no, then you're done. If the answer is yes, then we start to open up the policy inquiry of saying, okay, if we have authority, should we use it? That may result in another no. But the idea is each branch has this responsibility. President Trump has this responsibility. And so when he's looking at enforcing immigration law, he's saying, what authority do I have at my disposal that's been given to me by Congress? How am I going to take that authority and apply it to the situation in front of me? Because I think this is where we've messed up. The answer just simply cannot be that Trump cannot act if there's a federal district court judge who disagrees with him. Because if that's the case, we would have no government, regardless of the administration. Because which federal district judge are you going to ask? Do you ask some of them? Do you ask an appellate judge? Do you ask the Supreme Court? You don't. Any administration, Biden or Trump or Reagan or Kennedy, it doesn't matter. They're going to read the statutes and the Constitution in a manner that says we think we have the power to do it. Because, like Ron Swanson, the executive branch is going to basically say, I can do what I want. That's not unusual. And if anybody tells any of you, well, Trump, he is just doing what he is a dictator. We don't have a king in America, all that stuff. Just take a second and remind them about Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. Just say, hey, do you remember when Joe Biden tried to forgive about $400 billion in student loans? Do you remember that? Because he didn't have the legal authority to do it ultimately at the end of the day as determined by the United States Supreme Court. But he basically wrote himself a note that says, I can do what I want. Ultimately, we sorted it out. Do I think Joe Biden started off saying, well, I'm going to do an unconstitutional thing? No. I'm sure that his advisors and folks in his cabinet said, here's how we would construct the authority to argue that we can do this thing. They're not going to tell him, no, you can't do it. Sorry, end of discussion. It'll be sort of a yes and, like, yeah, we can do that. And we may have to survive a legal battle. And his effort didn't survive that legal battle. Trump is no different. Trump has his advisor, Stephen Miller, that whole cohort is telling him, here's what you have the authority to do, and here's the argument we would make to protect it. And a lot of people aren't going to like that, but that's how the process starts. You have to start somewhere. And so they make their best argument that they're going to do it. And that's sort of the end of the discussion. Then they do it. Then they're sued. Then a judge engages. And then if Congress wants to engage, they can engage. And that's how the due process works. That's what the system looks like. If the executive can't take any action to start the process, we don't have government. Robert has some questions. He's in Murfreesboro. Robert, what do you have about due process? Robert? Hello, Robert. Oh, Robert's not there. We'll go to Ron in Manchester. What are you thinking, Ron?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Tell me what you think. Ron, what do you think?
Yes. This is a question, and I'm asking out of ignorance. I'm not trying to be smart or anything.
That's okay. Thanks.
But how come the law of the land is executive orders rather than laws passed by Congress?
You know, Ron, it's not an ignorant question to ask. In fact, that's the reality that most Americans deal with. Just briefly, it's because Congress has given the executive branch so much of its Article 3 authority. It is said, or Article 1, sorry, has given so much of its constitutional authority away that the executive branch can just sort of look at there and say, well, what authority do we have that's been delegated by Congress? And now we'll just make up a regulation that fits that. Does that make sense?
Well, that's a good answer, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ron. I appreciate you calling. I think that's the problem, is an Article 1 power. There's a reason it comes first. This is the power of the Congress. It's first. The idea of judicial review doesn't really come into Marbury v. Madison. The court kind of gave itself the power to do that and said, that's our job here. This is what we do. But it was always that Congress would be the lawmaking branch. Well, here's what happened. And this is a very good point, and this is something we should take a minute to discuss. Congress realized that if we write laws that people don't like, they can blame us, and that would be bad. But if we take our power, write a very ambiguous law, and then let the executive branch bureaucrats fill it out, then we can blame them. So when Nancy Pelosi said of the Affordable Care Act, we got to pass the bill to see what's in it, she wasn't lying. It had been written in a way that had so many delegations of authority that said the secretary shall blah, 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 blah. And that's talking about the secretary of HHS and other government officials. And that's a huge problem because once you delegate it away, then the executive branch can look at it and say, oh, well, I've got this power here and that power there. And if you combine the two, then I can do this. And the truth is, the executive branch right now can keep government going just fine without another law from Congress. Other than funding, other than appropriations, the federal government's pretty much got the laws it needs to go. And I think that's frankly a big problem. It's something that's really, really bad. But Robert, I see that you made it back. I see you guys on the Super Talk text line. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back and discuss this a little more. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
You got to hear just how tired people in Clarksville are with floods. We've got that. Direct talks with Iran. President Trump says they're going to be high-level talks starting this weekend. All this and more coming up at 4 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back to the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. We've been talking a little bit about due process, and I think it's something that we need to continue to dig into because, one, you guys have questions, and two, it's used by the left to imply that Trump and Republicans can't do stuff. No, they can. They can do a lot of things. They just have to look at the Constitution and laws and say, do we have the authority to do this or not? They do it, and then they make their argument when they get sued, and then the courts sort it out. And hopefully Congress, which I am now referring to as the laziest branch, will take it up and clarify the issue. Because it's not just that the courts can clarify the issue. Congress can do it too and say, actually, what we meant by this, wherever there's an ambiguity, is this, and pass a law. But they don't do that. Robert in Murfreesboro, we're going to try this again. Robert, are you there?
I am, Chris. How are you today?
I'm not Chris. I'm Cameron, but that works.
Oh, I'm sorry. Cameron, I appreciate you. Listen, you actually in your last segment pointed out what I was going to say, and that is that the reality is Congress has become so ineffective at passing laws or even addressing the issues of the country that we've turned around and allowed the presidents to take on more power than what was ever set out to be. I don't think anyone, even those of us who support many of the policies that Trump is doing, nobody wants to see the president doing this many executive orders because they can simply be overturned.
Amen.
And Congress is doing nothing to put these things in the law. I appreciate what you're doing right now, educating people, putting out what the true concept of due process is, and I'm just a big fan of yours. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate it, Robert. Thank you. I mean, and this is a tough point to make, right? Because it's really easy to make it when Biden's in the White House. Because we look at executive actions, we look at his student loan forgiveness, and we say, well, clearly he can't do that. It's unconstitutional. And everybody, all you guys agree with me. When Trump's in the White House and the Democrats are saying, well, Trump can't do that, it's clearly unconstitutional, we're sort of saying, no, stop. What are you talking about? The problem is the power. I want to be real clear. As a conservative, government power is the problem. And so the idea that we say, well, actually, it's just the way it's wielded. Well, no, then you're just a statist in a different direction. Let's be clear about that. 615-737-9986, where you can chime in on this. A couple questions that you guys have asked that I think is really relevant. What level of due process protection are illegal aliens entitled to? Well, the Supreme Court's actually said that the due process clause applies to all persons within the United States, regardless of their legal status. That legal status, the process may be very brief. Congress may have cleared up, hey, under these circumstances, you can deport people very quickly. It does not mean, due process does not mean that you get to indefinitely tangle things. That's not the case. It means that you must have the due process of law. So you get arrested, you get deported. There's a process there to challenge the deportation, to say, no, you must do this. And yes, a federal judge can, in an instant case, make a call. Now, what I mean by that, a federal judge can say, I'm going to stay this action and prevent the executive branch from any more deportations or something like that while we figure it out. And it is incumbent on the administration to obey that order. Now, here's what happens. Whichever way it goes, the administration who wants to appeal that immediately appeals it to a circuit court or the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, depending on what the topic is. And that almost always will either address it quickly or do it efficiently. So the idea that federal judges can just declare things, look, there's some federal judges that make some bad calls. They make some bad rulings. They overreach. But that's why we have appellate courts and a right of appeal. So the administration is well-versed in how to do this, what they need to do. We see the Supreme Court jumping in and saying, oh, on this one, yeah, go. You can go. We're not going. We're going to pause this order. We're going to lift this stay. This happens all the time. And it's normal and it's okay. We actually want the back and forth. We want the collisions. We want this to be the process because it clarifies what due process is. It says what you may and may not do. And without those lawsuits, there's a lot of areas where the federal government just does stuff and it just doesn't go unchallenged. It goes unchallenged and then we don't get the benefit of a challenge to see whether it's legal or not. It's just literally a bureaucrat doing it and saying, this is how we're going to do it. We've got hours and hours to go before we sleep, folks. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Four o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Got the full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. And right now in Middle Tennessee, some folks in Clarksville are fed up with floods.
If the town don't buy me out, I'm selling off every asset I have, and me and my old lady, we're going to live on a cruise ship for the rest of our lives. If I'm going to be surrounded by water, I'm going to be catered to at this point.
Don't blame him. That's Joshua Levenberg telling Channel 4 he's lost cars, trailers, and now his late brother's motorcycle he was working on in this latest round of severe weather in Middle Tennessee. Earlier today, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency Director Patrick Sheehan said the storms are over, but not the floods.
It's going to take quite a bit of time for that water to recede. In some places, it could take weeks. So if you have roads that are covered in water, we ask that you turn around and don't drown.
At least 20 people are dead, 10 of them here in Tennessee as a result of the severe weather last week and this weekend. Right now in our nation's capital, the U.S. Supreme Court has paused that midnight deadline imposed by a lower court judge to bring back Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, whom the Trump administration alleges is a gang member and should not be allowed back in the U.S., but has admitted to mistakenly deporting him to that prison in El Salvador. Then there is this from Karen Travers at the White House.
President Trump said Monday his administration is having direct nuclear talks with Iran and said there would be a, quote, very big meeting Saturday at a very high level. He didn't give further details. A U.S.-Iran meeting would be a significant step, the first publicly known talks between the two countries since President Trump in 2018 withdrew from the Obama-era nuclear deal. Asked if he was ready to take military action if the talks with Iran don't go well, President Trump said,
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger.
No 90-day pause on Trump tariffs, sparking panic on Wall Street. Answering questions in the Oval Office today, President Trump said he would not be open to a pause to allow for negotiations.
We'll be talking to China. We'll be talking to a lot of different countries. And I think, if we can make a really fair deal and a good deal for the United States, not a good deal for others. This is America first. It's now America first.
Trump was sitting right next to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And we're going to also eliminate trade barriers.
As a week-long nationwide boycott of Walmart has begun, the company has announced a response, says Chuck Severson.
The boycott of Walmart is organized by the People's Union USA over the big retailer's rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, or DEI. Walmart announces it's working with other leading corporations, including Verizon, Blackstone, and PepsiCo, and given a grant toward a new website, skillsfirst.org, listing requirements for 9 of the most common U.S. jobs to help job seekers and employers that don't necessarily need a college degree.
That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News. Over here in the Gulch, got a crash blocking the right lane eastbound at Broadway. And then in Belmont, got a crash 65 northbound at Wedgwood Avenue. Police on the scene there. Over at the Eastern Split, TDOT still reporting the off-ramp partially blocked 40 eastbound to 24. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
You know it's a good day when you get to talk about due process. Get excited, folks. Meanwhile, I have lassoed myself with my headphones, so those of you on the video feed are get a free show. Let's check out the SuperTalk text line, 615-737-9986. It's also the call-in number if you want to talk. Let's see. We'll see if we can take these in order. We already talked about illegal aliens in due process. Basically, it applies to all persons in the U.S. That's a Supreme Court case law. Scott says, do judges have unilateral power to stop the Trump administration from doing something without a lawsuit or an argument from somebody on the other side who opposes what Trump is doing? No. In short, they can only address a case in controversy. The idea that a judge would just declare a thing would be met with suspicion by the appellate courts. So typically there's a fact pattern. You got to have somebody with standing. That basically means they have the ability to file suit. And then I'm not going to get into all the federal civil procedure. There's some law school students over at Vandy that would love to tell you about that right now. But the bottom line is there's a bunch of different ways, we decide where the right place is for somebody to hear a legal challenge. But make no mistake about it, a federal district judge does have a lot of power. It's just not absolute. They are hearing a case in controversy. If it's appropriately addressed by that court, then they're going to make decisions. And sometimes the decision is, I'm going to put a stay on this so I can figure out what's going on. So stop whatever it is you're doing. I'm going to figure it out. That's not a permanent injunction. It just may be a temporary one so that they can get some breathing room to kind of understand what the facts are. But they're going to issue an order. And yes, it can be binding on the Trump administration, but the Trump administration has a right of appeal. So where we would run into a big problem is if the Trump administration launches that appeal, they lose again on appeal, and then they say, well, we're going to do it anyway. Yeah, I get it with the Tren de Aragua situation, where was the flight in progress? Did the order apply? Should they have turned the plane around? I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what the timeline actually was. I can tell you the judge wasn't really happy about it. And that can lead to a contempt of court finding that can land people in jail. Generally speaking, you're looking at excuse me, somebody having to deal with a really ticked off judge, and that prejudices your case, if that makes sense. The judge is hearing the issue before their court. And if you decide, I don't care, I'm going to do what I want, and you make the judge mad, then it doesn't help your chances of winning. Kevin said, or they're just Democrat activist judges. Well, here's the problem with that. I hear that argument. On the flip side, Democrats can just say, well, they're conservative activist judges. Because as long as they're making a decision within the bounds of the application of the Constitution and law to the facts, it's their call. That's how judges work. That's the reason we have these appointments the way that we do, is because we want them to make calls. We want them to call balls and strikes and then have an appellate layer above them and even one above that so that we basically get a lot of this stuff right. So I hear it, but the notion of, well, it's a Democrat activist judge, so you don't have to listen to him. Well, if that's the case, then every administration is going to say that judges with whom they disagree are activists and they should be impeached. I disagree with that. The standard for impeachment should be high crimes and misdemeanors. And specifically with judges, it should be things related to truthfulness. If a judge is embezzling funds or something like that, we can't trust them to be honest. So they should be impeached. But we don't impeach federal judges that often, thankfully, because the standard should be high. But we've got layers to deal with this, and that's how we should deal with it. With respect to Congress, 5936 says the vagueness of the ways that laws are written and passed isn't just a matter of laziness. All laws passed have an element of what is allowed under the law and limits on what is not allowed under the law. They write the laws with a lack of clarity to give the government leeway in how they implement it. It allows them to punish some and favor others. It forces people into the courts to get clarification and protection where they have limited funds for court costs and the government doesn't. Fair take. I would say that this is probably the biggest issue in all of the federal government, is an impotent Congress. And I don't think that it's accidental either. I think that Congress likes ambiguity. Republicans like it and Democrats like it because they are trying to be there for the long term. There's very few members of Congress or senators that say, I'm just going to run for one term, and that's it. They see this as a career, whether you like it or not. I've heard people that say, the last thing I want to be is a career politician, and they've been in Congress 10, 12 years. Like, well, that's a lot of a career, you know? So what happens is they do not want to be held accountable for anything, so they pass ambiguous laws, and then they do a terrible job of holding administrations accountable. So what happens is the administration does something, and it's the law, it's a regulation that all of us have to deal with. We get mad about it, and then we go to Congress and say, well, I didn't delegate the authority of Congress. That happened before me. Oh, okay. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, you know, I don't think we have the votes right now to fix this. And then we just get into a round robin. And they love that because they can always blame somebody else. They never have to be accountable. I'm telling you, these Trump tariffs have been the first time in a long time that I've seen same party folks, that means Republicans in this case, talk about taking congressional authority back. Ted Cruz, Chuck Grassley, there's a bunch of them in the Senate and some in the House who have said, no, this is Congress's authority. We're the ones that should set tariff rates and tariff policy, not the administration. They should do it for a short period of time, like we talked about in the negotiation tactics and stuff like that. But ultimately, Congress needs to wield its authority. I have not seen that in a long time. I worked on a piece of legislation called the REINS Act, which is designed to remove the delegation of authority for this special class of federal rules called major rules. So that's an economic impact of plus or minus $100 million or more. And basically, the executive branch wouldn't have authority to implement those without a green light from Congress. So we wouldn't have to deal with really expensive regulations unless Congress said it was okay. That's the kind of thing that we need to do. But Congress is totally fine. Right now, you think that Republicans in Congress really want to take heat for the Trump tariffs? I already know the answer. They don't. They don't like it at all. They only want the good, happy things. So when you call them, you know, I don't think many of them are going to say, you know, just suck it up. You're going to be fine. Their attitude is, well, the president has authority here. The president can do this. Well, why does the president have authority there? Because you are lazy. You're lazy. That's the problem. John and Dixon wanted to talk about judges real quick. Hey, John.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well.
I just want to know, Why do unelected judges have so much power?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Do you mean the fact that they're appointed? Is that what you're saying? Why they have so much power?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've decided in the United States that we want them to be independent. We do not want them to be subject to the political process. Now, certain states have elections for judges. In Tennessee, we have retention elections. There's a lot of different ways here, but a lot of folks, I'm not saying all folks, but a lot of folks say, hey, we don't want the judges calling balls and strikes based on what's good for them politically. We want them to do it because they think it's the right legal argument. Is that fair?
Yeah. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you because sometimes I'm like, how in the world did that judge, reach that opinion? That doesn't make any sense. But if I don't give them the independence and they're just another politician, because in a state like Alabama, for example, where the Supreme Court judges are elected, well, they care very much about what does my opinion say? How is this opinion crafted? Will it be well received by the public? And I personally don't really want that from a judge. I want the judge to tell me, what does the Constitution say? What does the law say? Apply it to the facts. I understand there's some bad actors that don't do it that way, but there's a lot of good judges too. I'll say that.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it, John. I think a lot of people share John's sentiment. A lot of people look at this and say, how is it possible that any judge could reach such a bizarre conclusion? And I will tell you, as a lawyer who has read a lot of case law, I've read some strange opinions where it is contorted reasoning. It doesn't. Honestly, most of what's called substantive due process, there's procedural due process and substantive. Substantive due process, like that was used to justify the Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, talked about emanations of the penumbra of the Constitution, which is fancy talk for I made this up. And I don't support. I don't like it when judges sort of take it upon themselves to be legislators. But again, there are layers for review. It took a long time, but ultimately we got challenges back up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, hey, the prior Supreme Court just made this up. And I agree with them. And so having some stability in the courts actually helps us a lot. I don't love it sometimes when I don't like their opinions, but I do understand it. We got a lot of comments coming on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. We'll get to them on the other side of this break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Storms are over, but not the flood. President Trump says no to a pause on tariffs, and the U.S. Supreme Court gives him a victory. We'll tell you about these stories and more at 4:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. We've been talking about the separation of powers. We've been talking about judges having too much power, the legislative branch in Congress not exercising its own power. It's all a bit confusing, but hopefully Scott can help me sort this out. Scott, you wanted to talk about high crimes and misdemeanors.
So I remember at a time where Bill Clinton was being impeached, they were talking about high crimes that he had committed. And it's in the Constitution, but I have never heard anybody define what a high crime is.
Yeah, and it's a political question, so it's a little bit different, and I think that's really fair. Typically speaking, the conventional understanding is this is something like a felony, right? It's not a speeding ticket. But to be fair to the Constitution, it doesn't spell it out with exacting precision. And so typically that it's been taken to mean kind of a big deal. It's not just a matter of unfavorable perspective. It's you've committed a significant criminal act that undermines your ability to continue to serve, basically.
Yeah, so, I think it'd probably be better off during, like, impeachments and stuff if they could actually legally define what, I mean, what a high crime is. I get what you're saying, but there's other things that can be considered high crimes, too. And I'm going to leave you with your thoughts and listen what you got to say. What would be your definition of a high crime?
Sure. Thanks for the call, Scott. I appreciate it. My definition is pretty simple. I'm looking at this and saying, did you commit a felony? And if it's a felony that's, even for me, if it's a felony that's related to your ability to execute the office for which you have been appointed or elected, then I would vote to impeach you. It's pretty straightforward. Because I agree with this idea that if I'm trying to play a game of, well, you're kind of bad. This is where Democrats and Republicans, when they were impeaching Trump, and then Republicans were like, well, now we need to go impeach somebody. That to me is kind of the way I'd look at it. Matt says, well, we could use British common law. We could look at, a historical standard. Because it's open-ended and it's a political question, I understand if somebody said, well, just any felony. It doesn't matter whether it pertains to their office or not. Okay. But when we get to the point where it's, I don't like you, then that's not it. Or I disagree with you politically. That isn't it. I mean, I think the last time we impeached a federal judge was 2010, something like that. It was Judge Porteous, I believe, out of Louisiana. Again, be careful there, because once we start playing this game and pushing, well, I don't like your political outcome, and you don't like, now you don't like mine, then we're just doing this weirdo impeachment game, and it loses all of its gravity. And I think that's what we want to avoid, is a situation where folks say, oh, we got impeached, or this person got impeached because he was of or she was of the other political party. That's kind of weird. Kenyon in Gallatin has some thoughts. Kenyon, what do you think?
So a high crime, so if it's a felony, so is a DUI a felony? If Trump got in a car and went down the road and got a DUI, we would impeach him and throw him out of office?
So that's the reason I said that I think it's relevant to their job, right? That if there's a felony crime for which you're convicted and it's related to your ability to execute the office of your job, then I would vote to impeach somebody. If it's not, then I'd let the voters decide that, because I think impeachment, you're substituting your judgment for the will of the voters. So the only time that I would do that is if it was something that a voter could not easily consider and make a judgment call about. And when it's judges, it's a little different, because there's no vote upcoming to remove them. So with them, it would be, hey, did you commit a felony? Was it related to the execution of your job, and are you now unfit to do so? Okay. And that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, so like the last caller, I mean, so basically it's an opinion of a judge or whoever, because there are a number of felonies that you can commit. And if it's related to your job or not, I mean, as a president, I mean, really you should have a pretty good power to do what you need to do to make the country run.
Sure.
And so it's going to be opinionated and ambiguous to where who gets to decide if it's a high crime. Right?
Well, the Senate and the House files article of impeachment, and the Senate ultimately votes on those articles like a mini trial, and that's how we decide.
Sure, but look what Pelosi did, and look what the Democrats did in Trump's first term.
Yeah.
So it really depends on who's in power, right?
It does to a degree, but impeaching Trump, right? He wasn't removed by the Senate, so it basically says we're charging you with this, and then we didn't remove you. So what's the problem?
Well, we were lucky enough to have a majority in the Senate that wouldn't agree with the House.
So are you telling me the system works or it doesn't work? Sounds like it works.
That's a good point. Maybe it does work, but it only works if, let's say, the House and Senate in 2 years goes to the Democrats and they decide to impeach. Does that really work?
Yeah, I mean, and I would hope that there's enough Democrats sitting there that said, there won't be enough of us to reach the threshold for removal because the Senate conviction is what's 2/3. So it's a high standard. It's not just 51%. And so I don't think that what you're concerned about is really likely to happen unless we have something egregious, right? Like, for example, let's say President X, I'm not going to say Trump or Biden, President X is selling military secrets to a foreign government, right? And he gets caught. I would think that would be enough that they would be impeached and removed. And a federal judge doing the same thing, same result. Does that make sense?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So I actually does think it works. Thank you for the call, Kenyon. I think it works. It's not always fun, but I think the system still works. So I think it matters. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
.30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Got the full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. And right now in Middle Tennessee, the storms may be over, but not the flooding. Channel 4's Dryden Quigley from hard-hit Clarksville.
Everyone here on Freestone Drive has a different problem. For some families, like the one over here, it's that they are stuck in their house. Their driveway is completely full of water, and they actually have to use kayaks to get over here.
TEMA says it could take weeks for water to recede in some places of Middle Tennessee. Meanwhile, in our nation's capital today, Karen Travers covers from the White House.
President Trump was asked Monday if he would be open to a pause on his sweeping tariffs to allow for negotiations. He said no.
We're not looking at that. We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us.
The president said several times he sees an opportunity to reset the table on trade, and he's going to take it. But the White House has been inconsistent on whether the tariffs are permanent or up for negotiation. Asked about the mixed messaging, President Trump said it can be both and said his administration will get fair and good deals with every country.
President Trump said today his administration is having direct nuclear talks with Iran. Said there would be a, quote, very big meeting on Saturday at a very high level. And President Trump gets a win in the U.S. Supreme Court in the case of a man they deported to El Salvador.
It's a straightforward directive from the Chief Justice, pausing the order of Maryland-based District Court Judge Paula Sinas, who had set a midnight deadline for the man's return. Having been granted protection in 2019, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was not supposed to be deported to his native country, and the government says his removal last month was a mistake. But the administration also claims Abrego Garcia was an MS-13 member, and it argues that now that he's back in El Salvador, there's nothing the American courts can do about it.
That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News. Over here in the Gulch, we've got a crash blocking the right lane, 40 eastbound at Broadway. Then at Belmont, a crash. Police reporting 65 northbound at Wedgwood Avenue at the eastern split. TDOT still showing a stalled vehicle partially blocking the off-ramp, 40 eastbound to go 24. In Madison, police reporting a crash, 65 southbound before Old Hickory Boulevard. And in Smyrna, TDOT reporting a crash on the left shoulder, 24 eastbound at Sam Ridley Parkway. Traffic every 10 minutes, every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. We're rocking out to high crimes and misdemeanors. Get excited. And I did, over the break, check the threshold. I was correct. It is 2/3 in the Senate. So you get impeached in the House of Representatives, 2/3 of the Senate have to vote for removal. And let me tell you something. If Democrats have 2/3 of the Senate, then Republicans are really in a world of pain. That's just the reality. And in fact, I don't think at those thresholds, there would even really be a partisan axe to grind because Republicans have fallen into such a minority. So, again, these systems and structures do work. And if the argument is, well, what happens if the House majority is Democratic and there are 66, 67 senators who are Democrat? Well, guess what? The American people decided they wanted to give them the reins, and they can do a lot of things. But that's why elections have consequences, and I think they should. George in Mount Juliet had some thoughts. George, what do you think?
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going.
It's first time caller, long time listener, man.
Awesome.
Now I was thinking about listening to you talk about them judges, and
yep.
I think these federal judges have got too much power.
Okay.
And for one thing, they got a lifetime term.
Yeah.
And that's crazy, just like the Supreme Court. Now I think they ought to be elected every time you have maybe every 2 terms of a presidential or 1 term. For that district that they're over, ought to elect them, not just a few people in that district that appoint them.
So,
because the Democrats Schumer said the other day they put 140 in there right before Biden got out of office.
Right, and Mitch
and
McConnell.
All that was to do was to keep our process in turmoil for the whole time Trump's in there.
Well, and Mitch McConnell helped Trump get a lot of judges through. Did we like that?
Well, I don't know about that, but I know one thing. I know Democrats don't know the definition of a woman.
Yeah.
And the last judge they put on the Supreme Court didn't know the definition of a woman.
Well, do you think?
Now, to me, that's a pretty stupid person, ain't that to you?
Well, here's what I would ask you, George, is so you say that we should elect judges along federal districts. Well, that would mean that the Trump appointees and the folks in Tennessee, for example, would be, Republican judges, right?
Right.
But what about
Nashville, Memphis?
Right, but what about the Trump judges that were appointed in blue states and Democratic districts? You'd be okay losing those?
There's Republicans there too, and then there's people that's fair is fair. I'm not saying all Democrats are stupid, but this right side of Democrats right now drug gets up down to what, 23%?
Yeah, I don't.
In the poll,
that's their approval rating, but that's not their percentage of the population. Just to be real clear.
No, that's true, but I watch a lot of news, and I've seen a lot of what they say on there. And even from their news outlets that are definitely Democrat, they got some stupid things they're saying.
Yeah.
They're not making sense, and they don't really care whether they do or they don't.
Well, I saw some of the protests, and I'd have to agree with you on that they're not real concerned about the impact.
I have nothing against Jewish people going to college here. But I do have something against people from Iraq and Iran and in places that we're fighting over there coming here and starting trouble in the college. They need to have their visas revoked. They need to be sent home.
Okay. But as far as the judges,
put up with enough of that crap.
You think we'd be better off if we elected them? That's your take.
Well, basically, and the Supreme Court. I think they should have maybe 10 years or something like that because they get old. Look, the Supreme Court should do one thing, and that's follow the Bill of Rights and the Constitution.
Sure.
They shouldn't be able to vary off of that at all. Period.
Well, they have to apply it to the law or apply the Constitution to the law, and that's where you get your differences of opinion, right?
Yeah, but the opinion is stated in the Constitution.
if you read it.
The Constitution stated in the Constitution, but how that applies to a law that's enacted by Congress, that's what the judges have to decide, right?
Well, yeah, I guess that's what they're bound to now, but I don't think Congress should be able to change a law unless they change the Constitution if it don't agree with the Constitution.
Well, I think Congress has to be able to change the law. I agree with you that Congress shouldn't be able to pass unconstitutional laws, but that's why we have the courts to sort it out, right?
Yeah, but the court shouldn't have priority over the president when it comes to national security. You agree with me there?
Well, is the president doing something that's unconstitutional?
I don't think so, but they do.
Well, if he is, then I disagree with you. And if he isn't, then I agree with you. But I've got to have some way for somebody to make that call. And typically the courts make that call because they are independent, because they're not subject to political pressure. So they're more likely to just call balls and strikes because nobody can vote them out of office.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one thing. Nobody holds any judgment over them.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be. Everybody should have somebody or a body of people or the country that says, hey, man, this ain't right.
Well, the judges are subject to Congress because Congress can impeach and remove them, right?
Well, like I said, the Democrats in Congress can't get together on nothing. They haven't been able to do it the last 4 years.
Amen to that.
I mean, so I'm just kind of getting sick of this country, going down.
Yeah.
But because them old people are in there, like Schuler and all that bunch, it should have been gone a long time ago.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'd vote for Chuck Schumer right now, but thankfully I don't have to.
I would never have voted for him in my whole life. And that Elizabeth Warren, I have to turn the TV off when she comes on. I can't stand to look at the woman.
Well, she was just in town. I just saw that in the news.
God,
she was in town.
Known.
Yeah, George, you could have gone over and introduced
went
yourself.
Up there and protested.
Yeah, George, something tells me you're not a big protester. Am I right?
No, I never protested about nothing except, if it something in my town or something, school board. I've gotten a little huffy at the school board before when my kids was in school, but that's about it.
Well, I feel you there. Well, I appreciate the call, George. Thank you very much. Look, George is reflecting a sentiment that a lot of people share. They're tired of feeling like they elect folks, they want them to do their job, and then, boom, it gets all tangled and messed up. The counterpoint to that, and something I would say, is a lot of this stuff should be handled at the local level. It should be handled by the states. And so the more stuff we ask Washington to do, the more tangled it gets, because I'm telling you, folks, I know that folks from California have moved here and Chicago and these, places that are liberal. They're running away from those places because I have two neighbors from Orange County in California, and they are some of the most wonderful people that I know. And they're very, very, very conservative, and they ran away from the crazy. They said, we're not going to do that anymore. And what that means is that some places have a radically different perspective in the United States than we do. And that's why we got to be careful when we say, hey, well, we want to throw everything to an election. Well, when it comes to federal judges, I'd be real careful with that, because that means that in these districts that are very blue, if you had a Bush or Trump 1 appointee, they're just gone. And so everything just becomes political tribalism, and I think that's a problem for us. Jason, I see you on there. I'm going to get to you after the break. We're going to do that right now. I'm Cameron Smith. This is Matt Murphy Show on SuperDog 99.7.
Did you know you're overpaying for your health and wellness products?
With over 20 company-owned brands offering its members vitamins, supplements, wellness, and skincare products, you're able to save up to 70% off retail.
Members Nutrition can't change your life, but we can change the way you live.
We'll let you hear some of the lively debate over that undocumented students bill today at the state capitol. That story and more coming up at 5 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, Larry, too, said that I used to be a doofa loop like Dan. I don't know what a doofa loop is.
Doofa loop.
And said now I sound like Shepard Smith. But I was previously a doof. I don't know whether that's an upgrade or downgrade. A doofa loop to Shep Smith.
Was that big hairy elephant that was Big Bird's friend?
Definitely. No clue. I was Snuffleupagus.
Yeah, Snuffleupagus. I'm sorry.
Close enough. Doofaloop,
Yeah, I think he did belong to the Doofaloop family, though.
Yes, the order.
That's correct.
The order, yes. That's true. So we've got a couple of y'all with calls, and y'all have been real patient. Let me get to Jason in Mount Juliet real quick. What you thinking on judges, Jason? Jason, judges. It's your time to shine, Jason. And it's not today. Maybe tomorrow will be better. Let's see. Steven. What do you think about judges, Steven?
Hey, Cameron. Yeah, I was just, want to just say everybody's attacking Trump. Well, this ain't nothing new with these judges and these courts. It's been going on for his whole career, and he has won every time. So there's not going to be anything that this guy is going to do while he's running our country that, it's almost like every time he does something, just a bunch of dummies are standing out there, just spread out all throughout our nation. And they're just, every time he does something, he says, oh, he can't do that. That's illegal. And then so everybody starts going after him. Well, we're going to sue him for this. We're going to sue him for that. I mean, I would encourage anybody listening, man, to just go on YouTube, and there's an interview that he did with Phil Donahue from 1984, somewhere back in there, where this was freshly after he had a court case. Some judges and some lawyers and stuff were against him when he was in Manhattan in New York going through that phase, and he knows everything, man. He's not gonna do nothing stupid that's going to cause him to lose his position or to be impeached or anything. Everything he does, he knows is right. He's always been that way. He's been that way since day one. So there's not going to be any judge that's going to stop him. Nobody's going to impeach him. I'm just here to tell everybody, man, this president is.
So you don't think he's going to lose any court cases?
No, he's not going. He's not going to lose any of these federal court cases, any of these judges or anything that are trying to attack him and come against him. He's not going anywhere, man. He's here to stay. We're going to prosper. We're going to win.
Okay.
And we're going to beat everybody. So.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I'd like to hear your thoughts. What do you think? I mean, it seems like looking into a crystal ball. Looking through your crystal ball here, it looks like we're looking into Trump impeachment era coming around. I mean, if that's what you see, I don't see that.
He's been impeached, and obviously wasn't removed. But I do think he's gonna. So two things. One, you're right. He's doing stuff. When you're a president that does stuff, guess what happens? People sue you, and he'll win a lot of them, but he'll lose some too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just part of being president. That's how it works.
Well, he's just been through it so much, man. He's not. This ain't his. What's the old term? This ain't his first rodeo.
It is not. It is not.
Attacking him his whole career, man.
But that's part of being a president is getting attacked. I mean, literally, it doesn't matter who it is. You're going to be attacked because half the country's not going to love you. What happens.
Well, he's going to be attacked when I think most of the attacks we're seeing right now is just based off of fear. And a lot of people, even Republicans and independents, are really scared right now because of the whole trade tariff war thing, and that's why I think we're seeing they're picking up more steam on their side because people don't understand what he understands about world trade and
but I mean, so
stuff like
but
that.
you're saying he's not getting he's not going to get removed from office. I don't see that happening, but he objectively has lost court cases in a lot of them. That's just part of going through the legal system.
Okay, I mean, I don't know which ones you're talking about, or what was the substance of it, or how important
He's
it
lost
was.
cases here recently on USAID, refugees. I mean, there's been numerous, like he loses these just because he's doing stuff in the administration and he's not going to win at all. That's just the way it is.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate it, Stephen.
Yeah, man. All right, have a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Stephen, hey, he's encouraged by Trump. That's good. But let's be real about the legal realities here. Because Trump does stuff, you got to break some eggs to make an omelet. Some of the stuff he's doing with the federal government, the decisions that he's making, he's going to be sued and he's going to lose. Now, he may win on appeal. He may not. But the alternative is doing nothing, which seems to be the Democrats' best foot forward, is we would have done nothing. We would have continued Biden inertia. Isn't that what you really want? Well, I can tell you it's not what I want. I bet it's not what you want either. But we will continue the inertia of this show for at least 2 more hours. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Five o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Got the full forecast and traffic coming up in 5 minutes. Right now at the state capitol, Channel 4 says there was lively debate over that undocumented students bill that allows schools to disenroll illegal immigrant students if their parents don't pay tuition.
This is about denying innocent children of their right, of their God-given right, as guaranteed by this state constitution, to get an education as upheld by this U.S. Supreme Court.
Lots of energy by my colleague from Davidson County. We're not talking about immigrants, we're talking about illegals. There is a distinct difference.
Yeah, the bill ended up passing out of the House Government Operations Committee today. And the General Assembly's advancing a bill that renders out-of-state driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants invalid. News 2 says it would also become a Class B misdemeanor to have such a license in the state. The bill has one last hurdle before going to the governor's desk, the full state Senate. And right now in our nation's capital.
This is a special report from ABC News. I'm Michelle Franzen. Even as global markets shed value due to a looming trade war, President Trump is defending his sweeping tariff policy that's rattling markets, businesses, and economic stability. A growing number of lawmakers, including Republicans, pushing back and considering a Senate measure to give Congress the power to limit tariffs.
President Trump would veto a bipartisan bill in the Senate that aims to rein in his authority to impose tariffs. The legislation would require the president to notify Congress of new tariffs and require Congress to vote to approve those tariffs within 60 days of their issuance. A White House statement sent to Senate Republicans and obtained by ABC News says, quote, if passed, this bill would dangerously hamper the president's authority and duty to determine our foreign policy and protect our national security. Karen Travers, ABC News, the White House.
President Trump today says some tariffs could end up being permanent, he thinks, for some of those offending countries.
President Trump says his administration's having direct nuclear talks with Iran. Said there would be a, quote, very big meeting on Saturday at a very high level.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger.
He did not give further details. And turning to sports, the Tennessee Titans have announced the new voice you're going to hear on Sundays, replacing Mike Keith.
He could go 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown.
That's Taylor Zarzour. He's been calling SEC Network Saturday afternoon college football games since 2015. Says living in Nashville is where he and his wife have dreamed about.
It is the best thing that's ever happened to my career. I had no idea going into 2025
that this would be where I'm sitting right now, but I'm just so blessed to be here.
Yeah, Zarzer's going to call the games and host the Brian Callahan Show and the Titans Football with Brian Callahan TV show. The full 2025 Titans broadcast team will be released at a later date. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News. Briley Parkway northbound got a crash blocking the left lane before County Hospital Road. In Lebanon, got a crash 40 eastbound past South Cumberland Street. And here in the Gulch, right lane blocked by a crash 40 eastbound at Broadway. In Madison, police reporting a crash 65 southbound before Old Hickory Boulevard. And then in Smyrna, a crash on the left shoulder, 24 eastbound at Sam Ridley Parkway. Also, a stalled vehicle, right shoulder, 24 eastbound before Almaville Road. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. We're halfway into the Matt Murphy Show. And I was just looking under the control desk, and I believe I found Matt's leg warmers for his intersex ribbon work.
Oh, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
I don't need those.
I don't know how he's going to have calves that can do those movements without them. It's, and he keeps them in the studio. Sometimes when we're on Wednesdays or when we're recording our podcast, he just pops them on, you know? It just helps him move. When you have to elevate up on your heel like tippy toes.
Yeah.
If you have the calf warmers, it's a lot easier.
That's been my issue all these years.
I was getting ready to say at 5'5", I might look into getting some of those.
You should. They work great with a headband and sweatpants simultaneously. I'm asking for options. Speaking of 80s and things like that, had a couple of y'all ask sort of what the next project is. We have a script, and we're working through everything for our next project. That's actually the movie project is going to be a girls' softball movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's actually it's shaping up pretty quickly now, and I'm very excited about it because it's, I think, like Little Giants of girls softball. Those type of stories. We hadn't had a good one of those in a while. And we got a real cool story, and we have the opportunity to shoot everything locally, and hopefully I'll have some more information on that in the next week or two.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. I mean, these things are nuts. The fact that we have any content whatsoever to watch is shocking to me. Now that I've actually made a movie, it is just super surprising because the probabilities of success are very low. It's like herding cats. There are so many contingencies, so many things going on, and we just sit down on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever, and it's just there.
It's all there, yeah.
And it's like, hey, have fun. Yeah, it is truly shocking. And I never really thought about it until I got involved in the space, and now I realize, wow, like this is just, and you want to talk about a landscape that is changing every 5 seconds? It's the movies landscape. It's, well, now Netflix is buying everything. Now they're not. Now it's everybody has to stream for themselves. Wait a minute. We had Princeton advertising budget then. Now we don't now. But now we do again. It's Wild West because content is king. Everybody wants to hear it. I got to say the best content you can hear right now is all the best words. I mean, I just tweeted it out at D. Cameron Smith. You can go see. I just put up the Apple podcast, but you can, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can go hear them. But check them out. It's really easy to, I think Matt and I, in the latest episode, it was covenant and tariffs. Those were the words. And we don't know what the words are before we come down and sit down and record them. And then we have a back and forth about them. And we learn something. And hopefully you do too. And you don't have to sift through hours and hours of content. It's just right there. And if there's words that you want to hear us do, let us know. Let Matt know. Let me know. Just text us at D. Cameron Smith. You can tweet it at me. We're always looking for things where people, have a little information. We understand you guys are busy, that you've got things that you're doing. I've got them too. I have a minute every now and then to sort of dig into something. And when I can help you guys figure something out, that's the favorite thing that I do. When we're talking about due process or impeachment standards or tariffs, having conversations that give you a little knowledge and help me know what matters to you, that's what I'm here for. I want to help you understand what's going on, and I need to understand what matters to you. And so hopefully we can have a meeting of the minds there that can be really positive. I will say a couple of closing comments on the judiciary so I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee, so I got to talk to a lot of judges. And there are a lot of really good judges who do try to be true arbiters of the Constitution and the law, and they look at the Constitution and the law and the facts, and they try to make the right call. And some of those are Democrats, some of them are Republicans, but there's a lot of them that they take their job as a judge very seriously, and I appreciate that. So I don't want to give the impression that all judges are one way or the other. They're either Republican or Democrat on the bench. That's not true. Most of them aren't. They're just looking to see, do you have the constitutional authority and legal authority to do a thing? And Trevor says there's a lot of really bad judges too. That's true. And some of y'all we conflated two things. Federal judges are appointed by the president for a lifetime tenure, and they're confirmed by the United States Senate. The states have a number of different ways of electing judges. Some states are straight up popular election for judges and appellate judges. Some have what's called a retention election, meaning they are appointed and then there's an election to retain them and keep them in office or to get rid of them and have another appointment. A lot of different ways to do it. I don't support the idea that we would get better judicial outcomes if we elected federal judges. I think the system works great right now. I think we have a standard for impeachment that's pretty clear. And having some independence there really cools the temperament. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but our politics are really dicey right now. Super controversial. Everybody's inflammatory. Everybody's going after everybody. Okay. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in politics either. Deal with it. I like the idea that if I get sued, I'm going before a judge that isn't going to look at my case and say, well, you know, did you do a good job sharing my values or did you not share my values? I like the idea that I'm going before a judge that's going to say, well, what does the law say? And what did you do? And where were you on that continuum? And that matters a lot to me. I think independence, is anyone neutral? No. I think that's a lie that we tell ourselves that we want to believe. But can they be fair? Well, yeah. I mean, I'm very conservative in my perspectives and opinions, but I also try to be fair. I want to hear why somebody disagrees with me. Ultimately, I have to make a call about what I write about and what I say, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to know anything. Philip's been real patient, so I want to get to him. Philip, tell me about judicial tyranny.
Well, the judiciary is like Major League Baseball umpires, and you just alluded to the fact that they are appointed for life. And just like an umpire, you can't be fired for horrible calls, no matter how bad they are, no matter how everybody sees that they're terrible calls. And the law itself, like you said earlier, is very ambiguous. And that is the very problem that we have. There's the appellate courts and the judiciary. So one judge makes a call, and then it goes to an appellate court, and then the judges in that court say that judge was wrong, and then it keeps moving up the ladder until it reaches the Supreme Court, and even they don't agree on what the law is.
Sure.
So we really don't live under a rule of law. What we live under is an arbitrary rule of man, which was alluded to in the Declaration of Independence, because that's what we had in England, where a bunch of lords dictate to the populace what they want. And, you know, it's been proven by Harvard did a study about what the people want versus what, what do you call them? The people that go to get what they want from Congress. The
lobbyists.
Lobbyists. You know, when it comes to a point of if the people want it and the lobbyist doesn't, it doesn't happen. If the people don't want it and the lobbyist does, it does happen. So obviously the representatives of what we supposedly have as a representative.
Well, what would you change? You're now, you got a magic wand. What do you change about American constitutional structure?
A couple of things I would change is if a president, you know, powered in one position for too long leads to corruption, that would hold true for everybody. Congress, you know, the House of Representatives, the Senate, the President, and the judiciary. I don't think anybody should be given a job where they can't be dismissed, you know.
But they can be dismissed, right?
Right, and I think they all need to be.
The president and judges can be dismissed, right?
You know, the judiciary usurped the power of deciding what is constitutional and what is not when John Marshall took that position due to a midnight appointment. I think it was Jefferson that was making it, or Madison was. I think Madison was.
So, what are the terms? What are the terms? Like, help me out here. Let's focus. What are the terms? How long can you be president? How long can you be in Congress? How long can you be a judge?
There's 4 years each. I think what is it? Congress is 2 years per term.
Senate
and the
6.
Senate is what, 3 years?
6.
I'm not exactly sure. 6.
Yeah.
So 2 terms max. It wasn't even supposed to be a career. It was supposed to be a avocation that they would go to, you know, that people with businesses and farms and that were capable of coming to Washington. And
But what
doing
if
the
I
business.
like my representative? Can I keep them?
Well, only for a couple of terms. You know why? Why is it different than the president? Why would it be different? You can see how corrupt the Senate and Congress is. You have a huge number of senators outperforming Warren Buffett in the stock market. Whereas if you and I did it, it would be called insider trading, and we'd go to prison like Martha Stewart.
Well, insider trading is still illegal.
Pelosi does it, and we're not talking one side or the other. We're talking both sides. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. When
Right.
you have guys like, Joe Biden and who would be his counterpart on the other side of the aisle, McConnell, that have been there for 40-plus years each, and it's just corruption.
But why can the voters? Hang on. Why can't the voters make that choice?
The voters make the choice.
Why can't I, as a voter, decide? I'm going to play a devil's advocate here. Why can't you're telling me I can only have somebody elected for 2 terms? But if I actually really like them, you're telling me I'm not smart enough to make that choice?
Well, yeah, obviously not smart enough. It's about the president, according to the Congress and the Senate.
Well, right, but that's not how the system's set up. The system's set up with term limits for the president, but not for...
That only came about after Roosevelt was elected for his 4th term. That was, as a matter of fact, it was the Senate and the Congress. The Congress was the one that said that he shouldn't serve more than 2 terms. It wasn't the people. The people didn't vote on that. The Congress passed that law, and the Senate sent it up the flagpole, and that's how it happened.
So you would have you would have terms on everything.
Absolutely, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if you can stay in office for however long, you will write rules that benefit you, and that's blatantly obvious with what's going on in the Senate and what Doge is exposing right now.
Do you have any politician you think does have some character?
Very, very few. I think Tulsi Gabbard would probably be one, because obviously she was in the military and has called the military out for being inappropriate and being warmongers, basically, the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. There's not very many that are on a larger stage for me to get to know. And I think that most politicians probably want to do the right thing when they start out, but corruption, you get in a corrupt environment, you get corrupted. The founding fathers said this system is for immoral people.
It is.
And the legal system is probably the only thing worse than the political system.
All right.
It's so corrupt, and it had been so corrupt forever. And it's not like something new. I mean, it was, it goes back all the way to...
Philip, I got to take a break, so you got to tell me, last word, what you got?
Well, I think term limits for everyone in politics, and including the judiciary, would be helpful to get only people, because then it's only people that want to do it. It's not a career.
Sure.
It's not where you go to get rich. It's where you go to serve.
Well, I appreciate it, Philip. Thank you for the call. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. We'll discuss this on the other side of the break. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
President Trump says there will be what he calls direct, high-level nuclear talks with Iran this weekend. I've got that story and more at 5:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt. Jason, I see you over there. We're short time heading into the mid-hour break, so let me, if you can hold on just a minute longer, I'll get to you. I want to talk a little bit about term limits. This comes up all the time because people are understandably frustrated. They don't like the way things are going, and they think the best answer is to just flush the toilet more regularly. I understand that. But for the same reason that I think were I in elected office, I would be reluctant to impeach, I would also be reluctant to support term limits because I think voters have to make the decision. And the last caller said, hey, this government's only fit for immoral people. Well, I think that's probably true. I think the scariest thing is that Congress probably does reflect us, that we look at Congress and the approval rating is like nothing. We can't stand these guys. Well, guess who elects them? Guess who puts them in office? And then we turn around and say they're corrupt. It's awful. I think that until voters decide we're going to put people with character in office who will do their job and execute their job well and hold them accountable, term limits don't help. It's just flush. And I can tell you my bigger concern with term limits is I've seen the farm team. I've seen the folks that aren't winning these elections, and it ain't great. It's a huge issue. I'm watching folks like Lee Reeves and folks in the Tennessee General Assembly battle with county-level officials over whether or not voters should be able to participate in primaries. If those are the people that are trying to close out voters from local elected office, if those are the people on the bench for Congress, we're in trouble. It's not good. And I think that's something that we have to consider, is that we need to encourage our communities to be more active and be a part, not just complain about it. Okay, who are we going to get to run? Who are the people that we're excited about and that we can say, hey, we'll back you. Let's work together to figure out. We want somebody from our community who understands who we are to go to Washington and represent us there. And I've got another hot take, since we're going to do some hot takes. I think we should have more remote voting in Congress, not less. I think we should have more of an ability for Desjardins and Green and those guys, Andy Ogles, to vote in Tennessee than voting up in Washington. You know why? Because there's a bunch of lobbyists in Washington. They like it, that it's their environment, not ours, theirs. That swamp belongs to them, not to me. And so if I have Andy Ogles real close to me and I can go over at his office and he's going to be there, I feel a lot better. I flew up to Washington for another meeting. I walked up there, and Andy's office said I could ring a bell. I walked in, nobody's there. They said I could ring a bell, and I just walked out. I was like, okay, I guess bell ringing is a thing. Where if it's here, and that vote's there, and I say, oh, I know what they're voting on today. I'm going to go down and see how Andy votes. I got a lot more influence there. We got to take a break. We'll talk about it when we come back. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Got the full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. President Trump today says there will be what he calls direct, high-level nuclear talks with Iran on Saturday.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger.
Trump did not go into detail. The U.S. Supreme Court has paused tonight's midnight deadline for the Trump administration to return a man they deported to a prison in El Salvador. That man is an alleged MS-13 gang member, according to the Trump administration, but his family denies it. As for tariffs, some Republicans in the U.S. Senate want to try to limit a president's authority.
President Trump would veto a bipartisan bill in the Senate that aims to rein in his authority to impose tariffs. The legislation would require the president to notify Congress of new tariffs and require Congress to vote to approve those tariffs within 60 days of their issuance. A White House statement sent to Senate Republicans and obtained by ABC News says, quote, "If passed, this bill would dangerously hamper the president's authority and duty to determine our foreign policy and protect our national security."
President Trump threatening China with an additional 50% tariff unless they withdraw the 34% China slapped on the U.S. Back here in Tennessee, state lawmakers close to passing illegal immigration legislation. A bill that allows school districts refuse to enroll illegal immigrant children has one more hurdle to clear in the state Senate. It passed out of the House Government Operations Committee today, heads next to the last committee hearing in the House before its last stop in the Finance Committee, and then sometime next week it will go to the full House floor for a vote. And a bill that makes it illegal for undocumented immigrants to carry driver's licenses issued out of state has only to pass the state Senate, possibly as soon as today before it goes to Governor Lee. And as a week-long nationwide boycott of Walmart has begun, the company announcing a response, says Chuck Severson.
The boycott of Walmart is organized by the People's Union USA over the big retailer's rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, or DEI. Walmart announces it's working with other leading corporations, including Verizon, Blackstone, and PepsiCo, and given a grant toward a new website, skillsfirst.org, listing requirements for 9 of the most common U.S. jobs to help job seekers and employers that don't necessarily need a college degree.
That's the latest news, traffic, and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News. Accident blocking the left lane, Briley Parkway northbound before County Hospital Road. In Lebanon, we've got 40 eastbound past South Cumberland Street. Highway Patrol on scene of a crash there. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith. While y'all were out, I looked at capitaltrades.com, which logs the trades by members of Congress because they have to report it. It doesn't say exactly, but it says buy, sell, what it was, the size. For example, on April 1st, Representative Steve Cohen bought 500,000 to, I shouldn't say it was published April 1st, traded February 23rd. He bought 500,000 to $1 million of U.S. Treasury bills. Mark Green on February 19th bought a gold trust ETF. You can see this stuff, and you can, if you wanted to do it with them, you could follow them. I think it's something a lot of people are like, it makes me a little queasy. And as somebody who's worked on Capitol Hill, I can tell you, you do have access to a lot of information. People come and talk to you about what they're thinking, what laws will impact them, what's going on. You know, whether or not that's insider information or publicly available, it varies, is what I would say, because there's a lot of information you can glean from public statements of CEOs and other people that's the same as what you get in Congress. But as a general rule, I think making sure that they disclose it so you know what they're doing is relevant, and it allows people to make informed decisions. If you want to see what they're doing, you can see it and you can vote for them or not. Jason, Mount Juliet Judges, what's going?
So I've agreed with pretty much everything you've been saying. A little baffled at all the people that won elections for judges when 90% of people don't even pay attention to anything other than the big players on the ticket.
True.
But I think a lot of the animosity comes from with federal agencies and executive orders. One of 700 plus district federal judges can put a nationwide injunction and shut down the commander-in-chief of our country with one decision. And
sure.
Naturally, what all these people keep alluding to are these, judges that need to be impeached. You got judge shopping going on. So you have people, out there that know where they're going to get a favorable opinion.
Sure.
Where they can shut this stuff down. So I guess my question from your legal background, how is it possible that one of 700 people plus in this country can shut down what our commander-in-chief basically pens with an executive order, and then we need, at minimum, 2/3 of an appellate court, if not a larger panel of the appellate court, to overturn it? And if that doesn't work, we then need 5 votes out of 9 on the Supreme Court to overturn it. So how can one judge have the ability to shut something down at that level when the levels higher than that judge don't have that power?
What do you mean? The appellate courts can absolutely reverse them, or they can say they got it wrong. They can remand it. There's a whole lot of things they can do. So they definitely have more power than the federal district court.
To a degree, but how does one person have the ability to shut down an entire executive order nationwide?
Well, typically what happens is that you've got it's a specific act or something that is enjoined in the district court. And if it's a federal question, the issue is it properly filed in that court, or is it something about a federal policy that ought to have been filed in federal district court in Washington, D.C.? There are fair questions on all of that. I would argue that we do have good appellate review on these things, and it does go quickly. So an appellate court sees this and says, okay, now we've got an injunction that's slowing this down. If this is going to cause harm, then we've got to decide quickly. And in a lot of instances, the appellate courts do. And the Supreme Court here recently has said, we'll jump in too, that if this is hanging things up and it's absolutely permissible, we'll say, no, we're not going to pause because we don't think the threshold has been met for the injunction, and so we're going to allow it to continue. Or the other way, I think it was Roberts today, paused an order requiring repatriation of somebody. That's that's actually the process working quite well, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, yes. Looking at some of the stuff, like especially with Boasberg, that's still going on. If they want to impeach him, right? Everybody on the right wants to impeach this guy. And it's basically one person that's shut the ability to deport people that are basically on a terrorist watch list.
Sure, but what
from our country?
Put it hypothetically in the other direction, okay? Let's say it's a Second Amendment case, and there is a state that has an unconstitutional gun law, and a judge makes the right call and says, you know what, we're going to enjoin, or I will say the federal government. The federal government has a gun ban that's unconstitutional on its face, and a federal district judge strikes it down and says, no, this is unconstitutional on its face. Is that too much power too? Because otherwise it's just in one way. It's like one direction.
I think to that point, how many times have we seen an appellate court rule in favor of, say, magazine bans, for magazines over, 10 rounds, yet another appellate court has ruled that it's not constitutional. And then now we've got two conflicting appellate courts that are not affecting a nationwide outcome. And then we have to wait for the Supreme Court to decide whether they're going to take it up.
Right. But that's
which they have not in some cases.
Right. And that's typically how that goes. And Heller would be a great Supreme Court case that's like that. I mean, it's totally fine to have that. It is a process. I don't see that there's anything wrong with that process. If you've got a judge that you don't like their opinion, and you are correct that folks absolutely do forum shop. They're trying to figure out, where can I file this suit to get the best result so that I set myself up for a good appeal? Well, right. I can tell you, I've listened to Alliance Defending Freedom, which is very much a conservative legal organization, do the same thing. I mean, it's smart lawyering. So to say you can't be a smart lawyer seems to be wrong. That's not what you're saying, is it?
I'm not saying that you're not a smart lawyer.
No, not me.
I'm saying that they're utilizing, what I'm basically saying is activists on one side or the other. And I don't recall during the whole executive order that enabled COVID to be, basically enforced through work mandates, through OSHA, if that was stopped by a nationwide injunction, or if that just went through one of the, regional appellate courts and eventually stopped. I can see where the nationwide injunction's a good thing, but I think on the flip side of that, there's an abuse of it, if you will, that is perceived by so many people when they see, someone like Boasberg, come out with these nationwide injunctions and completely shut down, the individual that's supposed to be our commander-in-chief. And they can make this decision whether it's constitutional or not, sometimes based on their own feelings on what they feel, or they may have a conflicted interest. Now, I haven't researched it, but there's, articles out there claiming Boasberg has a daughter that's an immigration lawyer and profits off of, these people that are being deported, lawyering for those types of people.
But do you think the judge should be responsible for the, occupation of his adult children?
I don't, but it can be perceived as a conflict of interest with that particular judge. Can they not move it to a judge that does not have family that would have potential conflict of interest?
So I hear the conflict of interest, but the conflict of interest should apply for the judge. But the idea of, well, your daughter has an occupation, for me to go tell a judge, well, you have family that are in these industries, if we're going to do that, man, we're going to have to recuse a lot of judges, because we're saying you can't be independent if your family is occupied in an industry where you might have to hear cases. And like if my dad was a judge and I'm a writer for the Tennessean and do radio for Cumulus, then that judge can't hear any First Amendment cases?
But why can it not be moved to another judge if that were the case?
Because there's no actual conflict. Like it would be different if I was, my dad was hearing a case that I'm a party to, but if we're now going to judge whether a judge can be objective by the occupations of his or her children, I mean, we start to get some weird outcomes, right?
We do, but that is where that is where the perception and the whole thing gets blown so far out of where we should be at with it, with people, is, when they see these different aspects, right? So, you got one of 700 guys can completely shut down a president, and then, the same thing, they look and they think that there's corruption because these people have a wife that might be an attorney that does the same thing. And, the judge can be impartial, or is there a perception that maybe they're not? Because
and they'll get reversed on appeal if they're not. Like if a judge has a conflict, the appellate court will immediately be like, wait a minute, your kid is one of the parties to this case. You should have recused yourself and you didn't do it. We're going to reverse this. And, I'll use the Biden student loan cancellation thing as an example. The lower courts did block that from happening. And then they lost at appeal. And the Biden administration kept appealing. But if it's, hey, a federal judge couldn't stop that from happening, well, we wouldn't have liked that result, would we?
No, absolutely not. I guess it's, I think the biggest issue people take up, and a lot of my friends' frustrations, is that at such a low level, someone can make such a high decision that can impact an entire country.
Sure.
And then tie it up into the court system.
Sure.
Is there a way to limit, the federal injunction power of one of these 700 plus district judges? And perhaps if their decision is X or Y, then maybe the federal injunction comes at the next level if that is upheld, versus just having one person versus a, panel of 3 or, 10, judges in an appellate court take up the case. So, I think what frustrates people is when they sit there and they see that this one individual is basically, perhaps not even looking constitutionally at something and making a decision for the whole country, overriding, the individual that 77 million people elected to clean up the country and change things that they felt were unjust, right?
Right. And then the other chunk of the voter electorate didn't vote for. I mean, that's the problem here is, if it's just the only voices that matter in the room are the majority, then we wouldn't need a judiciary at all, right?
No, absolutely. And, that's why I keep falling back on, the ability for one person to shut down all of that, and then it has to work its way up the court system. I don't understand where, they wouldn't hold that injunction power at a higher court level.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the call, Jason. We gotta take a break. So thank you very much for your call. I think that's something that we should address. We do have to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
For many of us, generators are becoming a must-have household appliance. From unpredictable weather to surprise outages, it's better to be safe than sorry. Generator Supercenter of Nashville offers fast and easy installations with 24/7 service and monitoring to all brands of generators and expert repairs done right. Our mission is to make owning a backup generator simple and easy. Visit your local store today or check us out online. Generator Supercenter of Nashville. We serve all Middle Tennessee.
Storm threat is over, but not the flood. And the Trump administration gets a temporary victory in the U.S. Supreme Court. These stories and more at 6 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. For a short moment until our last hour, I do want to talk about the injunction standard here in about 30 seconds. It's not that a judge just says, I feel like I'm going to grant an injunction. They get a motion to grant an injunction, and then a court basically has to say there's a likelihood of success on the merits, there's potential for irreparable harm if you don't grant the injunction, there's a balancing, it's called a balancing of the equities that favors it, and that is in the public interest. So that there are components of a test that a judge must sort of check the box. And then if that judge doesn't do that on appeal, you can appeal the motion and basically say, no, they didn't do it right. And so I do think that we should trust our processes a little bit more because they have worked. They worked against the Biden administration, and sometimes that means they're going to work against the Trump administration. We got to take a break. Let's come back for the next hour. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Six o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. And right now in Middle Tennessee, people in Clarksville are fed up with flooding.
If the town don't buy me out, I'm selling off every asset I have, and me and my old lady, we're going to live on a cruise ship for the rest of our lives. If I'm going to be surrounded by water, I'm going to be catered to at this point.
That's Joshua Levenberg telling Channel 4 he's lost cars, trailers, now his late brother's motorcycle he was working on due to flooding over the past 11 months. Earlier today, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency Director Patrick Sheehan says the storms are over, but not the flood.
It's going to take quite a bit of time for that water to recede. In some places, it could take weeks. So if you have roads that are covered in water, we ask that you turn around and don't drown.
At least 20 people are dead, 10 of them here in Tennessee after days of severe weather stretching back to last week. Right now in our nation's capital, the U.S. Supreme Court has paused that midnight deadline for the Trump administration to bring back into the U.S. Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, the man in Maryland who was deported to El Salvador for alleged ties to the MS-13 gang. And no 90-day pause on Trump tariffs.
This is a special report from ABC News. I'm Michelle Franzen. Tariffs rattling markets worldwide and the U.S. adding to losses from last week. Adding to the pressure, President Trump vowing an additional 50% hike on China goods after China issued reciprocal tariffs on the U.S. And a growing backlash from lawmakers is growing, including Republicans saying a trade war is bad for the U.S. They're poised to support a bipartisan bill in the Senate to limit the president's tariff powers. And Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska now vowing legislation in the House. ABC's Alex Brachet has more.
Speaker Johnson today was asked by R.J. O'Brien if he agrees with the Bacon legislation. He said Congress will weigh in on it, but the president, with the administration in tandem, you have to give the president the latitude and a runway. That's also something that we've heard from Republican senators. It seems like the majority are saying right now it's a wait-and-see game.
An unexpected announcement on nuclear talks with Iran as President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House this afternoon.
We're dealing with the Iranians. We have a very big meeting on Saturday, and we're dealing with them directly.
Now, he said if talks don't go well, Iran will be in what he said, quote, great danger. And after a week-long nationwide boycott of Walmart has begun, the company announcing a response. Here's Chuck Severson.
Citing a workforce where a majority don't have college degrees, Walmart announces it's working with other leading employers through a Skills First workforce initiative, giving a grant to create a new website, skillsfirst.org, listing requirements for 9 of the most common U.S. jobs to help job seekers and employers. Walmart says its partners include Bank of America, Home Depot, Microsoft, Nordstrom, PepsiCo, and Verizon.
That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News. TDOT says still a crash. Briley Parkway northbound before County Hospital Road blocking the left lane. In Berry Hill, police reporting a crash 65 northbound past I-440. In Jolton, got a crash reported 24 eastbound near the Cheatham-Davidson County line. In Lebanon, got a crash reported by the Highway Patrol 40 eastbound approaching Highway 109. And in Laverne, Old Hickory Boulevard, got a crash reported by police just north of I-24. And in Murfreesboro, 24 eastbound, right there at New Salem Highway, got a crash. It's being cleared up. That's good news. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back for the final hour of the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. Thank you for joining me. I really enjoy these conversations that we get to have occasionally. And frankly, I think that's important that we communicate about this stuff because I think a lot of people are afraid to have disagreements publicly. Something is wrong with me. When my mother told me that polite company doesn't have politics or religions discussions, I was just impolite because I think that's what's wrong with our country is we don't know how to have difficult conversations and kind of grind through it. We have to do this if we want to survive as a country. And so I understand that there's going to be times where y'all disagree with me and there'll be times where I disagree with you. But the whole point is that we kind of figure it out and then we keep moving forward. And I think, for example, you should not be shocked at all that Democrats and progressive groups are going to go after Donald Trump hammer and tongs, literally. They don't like what's happening. They lost an election and they've decided to protest and do all that stuff. Fine. Trump's a big boy. He can handle it. I mean, that's how this is supposed to work. He does stuff. You disagree with it. We sort it out in court. And I looked up Judge Boasberg's daughter's occupation, and I don't think she's a party to the lawsuit at all. So for me, that's not a conflict. Saying, well, his daughter's a liberal. Okay, fine. Like the ideological leanings of a child should not be enough to cause you to recuse yourself if you're a judge. And frankly, I don't think if your child or child's company is not a party to the lawsuit, that shouldn't be enough either. To say, well, they are in this field of study. I mean, otherwise, we're going to have a laundry list of things that could cause reversible error across the federal judiciary. And the truth is, we do have standards for injunctions. They do exist in the field of law, and we do have an appeals process for it. And I think that's really important. And Chris, on the SuperDoc text line, 615-737-9986, made a good point that I think is worth restating. He said, if Donald Trump was 30 years younger, I'd love to vote for him for the rest of my life. Okay. Change the Constitution. We have a process for that, too. I know that it is boring, and nobody likes the answer of, hey, the processes work. We got to let these work. It's not sexy. It doesn't give you the headlines that you want. But I think it matters. And I'm tired of Congress hiding. I don't think it's fair to put all of this on Donald Trump and say, hey, you either govern in the way you were elected to govern or not without a Congress backstopping you at all. And that's where we find ourselves right now. let's be honest, is that Congress isn't doing what it's charged with doing. And I don't look at it like it's the Congress's job to rubber stamp Trump. I actually disagree with that entirely. I want the Congress to be challenging the administration. I want there to be some tension. But at a minimum, Congress needs to enact laws. And Congress needs to say, here's what we're doing consistent with the people who put us in office. And right now, you can call most of your representatives and say, what are you doing? And they say, well, here's something that the Trump administration has done. Nope. What are you doing? Well, we agreed to a budget resolution. Okay. Anything else? No. How inspiring. And that's where we find ourselves. And I mean, all this business over town halls of, think about it. This is how pathetic Congress has gotten. Well, there are going to be Democrats who will show up at my town halls, and they will say many, many angry things and ask me very difficult questions. I'm not going to do that. Really? Really? I would not support any representative who said they were not going to hold town halls because Democrats might commandeer them. You know my response? Bring it. Let's go. And I'll stay there until you're tired. I don't care if it's 5 a.m. Because if you believe in your principles and you're standing for the people that sent you to office, you don't have anything to be afraid of. Democrats aren't going to like Republican ideas and policies. They shouldn't. It's okay. But you should never be afraid to stand and deliver. You should never play, I'm hiding, because you never know when George Soros is paying some weirdo to come to your town hall and take pictures. Okay. I mean, George Soros could pay everybody, and I'd still do the town hall. And, going back to the radical idea of voting, the idea was, well, we have to get rid of this proxy voting or this remote voting. It's 2025. Okay? Let me tell you how much of a requirement it is to be in Washington, D.C. to vote. 0. We can have very secure channels for voting that aren't subject to hacking and stuff like that. It's not that hard. But here's a dirty secret. Congress likes the swamp. They like being glad-handed by lobbyists. They like going to the dinners. They even like the salty popcorn at the Capitol Hill Club. The idea of having to stay at home with the people who they represent while conducting business sounds way less fun. There's not going to be so many agencies that have their dinners and educational events for members of Congress where they can sit there and, throw back a glass of wine while learning a little history. And so I actually think that it's a better idea and more in our interest to allow for remote voting for members of Congress and to encourage them to hang out with us. For the same reason that I think it's a great idea to decentralize the federal government itself. You heard me right. The physical locations of the federal government should be, the physical headquarters should be blasted around the United States. There should be no federal headquarter enclave in Washington, D.C. We'll still have the Capitol there. We'll still have the White House there. That's fine. But the idea that we need everything centralized in one place to make it easy for lobbyists and special interests is silly. And yet we allow this and in fact, demand that they go there. It's like throwing a pig in a mud pit. No, don't throw me in the mud pit. And then they love it there. Same deal. A couple of you guys, Sally's got some points, 737-9986 on the Super Talk text line. Sally's got a point. She said, it's 2025. It's time for term limits on Congress. Yes, I'm going to beat this dead horse. Sally, I don't think that it's a bad idea to make the argument. I just don't feel comfortable telling the voters that they're too stupid to figure out who they want to represent them. Well, I've got to have term limits to get rid of that person. because they'll be corrupt and awful, and we're just going to grind through them. You're not capable of making a good decision, so therefore we have to have term limits. Okay. But just be comfortable that that's the statement that you're making. And it's a fair point, since the, I think it's 22nd Amendment was 1951 that said, okay, here's the term limits for the presidency. As powerful as the executive branch is right now, I absolutely support that. I would not vote to repeal that. Jason said we also need a maximum age. Amen. In fact, I've said live on the air, I can't remember if I've written it in column or I've just said it live on the air. I'm not going to vote for any candidate for president of the United States that is above the American life expectancy. I'm just not going to do it. If you're on the other side of that, then there are a lot of things that you're not connecting with where my family is. And you know what's going to happen someday? I'm going to, Lord willing, be in that same situation, and I would have to accept people not voting for me if I was in office. And I think I'd be okay with that. 0249 says, well, what about when you elect somebody who does a good job but over time becomes corrupt? I'll speak to this specifically. I think there are a lot of people that do a good job that get elected that get a little too comfortable with Washington. And I'm not saying corrupt. And when I say corrupt, I'm talking as a legal term. Legal corruption is I'm taking bribes. This is Bob Menendez stuff. I got gold bars in my house from foreign leaders. As somebody who's been up there a lot and worked in the House and Senate, I can tell you I don't think most people are in that camp. But what does happen is a lack of sensitivity to normal people over time. When you're used to being important in Washington, Washington's a name tag culture. They're looking at your title and your tag and seeing who's higher up on the pecking order and who knows which people on staff and who can get a direct meeting with whom. And that's awful. It's just awful. And my point is, okay, so we keep trying to combat the swamp. You know what keeps winning? The swamp. And it's like a fun little thing that we talk about and we say, we got to drain it. We got to do this. How about you just find new real estate? Because nobody wants the swamp. So let's not put the headquarters of the federal government all in the swamp. We don't have to. I'm sorry if I get animated about this, but this is a self-inflicted wound. There's no constitutional requirement that says every federal headquarters must be in Washington, D.C. Put Department of Agriculture in Oklahoma. That way when Ken goes and sees the Sooners, he can go check on farm policy. But force people to move around. Force people to, if I want to be a lobbyist, it just got a whole lot more expensive. Because I got every agency I want to go talk to the head of that agency, guess what? They got to go all over the place. I got to talk to the deputy secretary of whatever. I got to go fly somewhere. So it slows that down. And I just think that's an obvious, knowing the swamp well, the swamp fits alligators. If alligators have to get on an airplane and fly around the country, it's a lot less likely that you're going to have that same environment. It just is. And, Joe at least says it on the Super Talk text line. He said, Cameron, people have sent back Mitch McConnell, Dianne Feinstein, Joe Biden, Maxine Waters, and others for decades. They are not smart enough to be trusted. Well, then this whole republic's in trouble. It just is. At some point, we gotta talk to the people. But we'll continue this conversation. Y'all clearly want to, so I'll humor you on that. I think it makes sense to have a little bit more of this conversation. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Storms are over, but not the floods. Supreme Court rules in favor of the Trump administration's use of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act in the case of a man deported to El Salvador for alleged gang ties. We'll have these stories and more. Closing Money News at 6:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back to the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. Andrew had a good idea. Andrew was saying, Andrew was not saying I was late to the party. That was somebody else. I agree with you that term limits are impractical. Term gaps would be ideal. After 2 terms, you got to go home and take a break. Makes them get a big boy job and be a real person. If they were great, they'll be elected back. Otherwise, the electorate has to explore other options. I like that better than term limits. My preference would be that we take this a little bit more seriously as voters. And we ask them, what have you done for me and my family lately? How are you representing me well? Because what happens is they feed us back the talking points that they know we want to hear. Like, I can do that to you. I can look on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986, and I can just kind of figure out who wants to hear what. I could break up the caller list, and I could be one thing to one group and another thing to another group. And I can tell you that's a lot like politicians with lobbyists in Washington versus constituents at home. And so if you want to change that, make those politicians hang out with you. Make them stay at home. And if they're too chicken to have a town hall, I mean, I have a lot of liberal friends. I have a lot of super conservative friends. I am not afraid of any of them because they are my friends. And if we want to have a discussion, sometimes we have lengthy discussions that last a very long time because really, for example, some of my Democratic brethren believe that my problem is that if they just explain their liberalism to me long enough, that I will accept it and they will be right. And we just disagree. And so they keep telling me why. They explain it to me like I'm 5. Help me understand Marxism. Well, thank you for that, but I'm not a Marxist, so I'm not going to come around to your way of thinking. And that's okay. That's where we've lost our way a little bit, in that Chris says he's sorry that he called me a rhino. Well, I appreciate that, Chris. I can't very well ask members of Congress to be thick-skinned and stand and deliver if I'm not willing to do it. And that's one of the reasons that I have such a good friendship with Matt. It's because he's the same way. Is you got to be able to dish it out and take it. That's how we engage the political space. And if you don't, if you're just sort of like, I like saying what I want, but the moment somebody disagrees with me or questions me, they're the enemy, maybe you're a snowflake. And we hate that on the left. We should hate it on the right, too. Be resilient. Stand and deliver. Defend your position. I'll tell you what. I'll give some credit to some folks who have said, I kind of like these tariffs. And here's why. And they've got their reasons. I may disagree with them, but man, I appreciate you standing up and saying why you think they're good. And Sally says, I'd love a more informed electorate, but we don't have that. And I doubt we ever will as long as we keep improving technologically. The smarter the car gets, the dumber the driver gets. Amen, Sally. So it's funny. That's really good. I agree to a point. I think that we're in and this is so dorky, but I'll put it out there. I think we're in a transition point for technology. I think technology has caused us to be the commodity. Our attention spans have been the commodity. We all know it. That's the reason you're doom scrolling on the toilet. Everyone knows that. But that's with AI. And I'm not saying I trust all AI. That's not it at all. But I think increasingly we're going to have personal AI engines that are between us and the internet. The idea of going to a website is pretty limited now. But once you have an AI that basically does all the searching, looking, browsing for you and gives you what you want, there's going to be a gatekeeper to your attention. So you're going to see exactly what you want when you want it and consistent with how you value things. Well, I don't want to be stuck on my phone all the time. Okay. Well, that AI can help you with that. Here's what you need to know. Here's your briefing. I'll keep you caught up at lunch. So you don't have to stare at your phone 1,000 times between breakfast and lunch. That's going to happen, and I do think that's going to help. But if the answer is just people are really dumb and our politicians are also really dumb, then maybe we're just dumb. And that stinks. But the only way to deal with that is to improve our education, which, man, I've been crying about that for a minute or two. It's a huge problem that we don't have enough educated people that care about this stuff. And we just keep on shoving them through the system and hoping that folks will come out knowing everything and feeling good about it. I mean, when you take away a lot of this important stuff about our country and why it's great and what matters about it, and then you expect people to just know it, good luck. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
.30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast and traffic in 5 minutes. And right now in Middle Tennessee, yes, the storm threat is over, but not the flooding. Channel 4's Dryden Quigley from hard-hit Clarksville.
Everyone here on Freestone Drive has a different problem. For some families, like the one over here, it's that they are stuck in their house. Their driveway is completely full of water, and they actually have to use kayaks to get over here.
Officials say it could take weeks for water to recede in some places of Middle Tennessee. Supreme Court lifting a court order blocking President Trump from deporting Venezuelans under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act.
It's a straightforward directive from the Chief Justice, pausing the order of Maryland-based District Court Judge Paula Sinas, who had set a midnight deadline for the man's return. Having been granted protection in 2019, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was not supposed to be deported to his native country, and the government says his removal last month was a mistake. But the administration also claims Abrego Garcia was an MS-13 member, and it argues that now that he's back in El Salvador, there's nothing the American courts can do about it.
Money News, Michelle Franzen.
Markets continued their fall on Monday, trading flirting with bear market territory following President Trump's sweeping tariffs. The Dow down 349 points at the end of trading. The S&P lost 12, and the Nasdaq gained 15 points. Markets rallied briefly in the morning until the White House denied rumors that the president was looking to pause tariffs. President Trump says he's now considering additional tariffs on China after Beijing placed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. A handful of Republican lawmakers concerned about the new tariffs policy have signed on to bills that would require Congress to vote to approve new tariffs. Apple is fighting a British government order to provide backdoor access to the iPhone's cloud data feature. In February, Apple said it would stop offering advanced data protection to UK users when Britain's Home Office asked for the access, raising fears of electronic spying by British security officials.
That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News. Jolton, police reporting a crash 24 eastbound near the Cheatham-Davidson County line. In Laverne, an accident blocking the right lane 24 westbound near Waldron Road. In Donaldson, an injury crash, Lebanon Pike west of Briley Parkway. And in Lebanon, an accident reported by the Highway Patrol 40 eastbound approaching Highway 109. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back to the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. Appreciate you guys being with me today. This has been a fun one. Daryl said, I like dispersing the agencies. Agriculture to Nebraska. Sorry, Oklahoma. It's Nebraska. FAA to Kansas, where the wind comes sweeping down the plains. TVA to Knoxville. Well, it is the Tennessee Valley Authority. I also believe my boy, Scott Desjardins, has gotten too comfortable in D.C., haven't been successful voting against him in primaries. If I don't get another choice, I'm going to vote Democrat. Interesting. All right, Daryl, I appreciate that. And unfortunately, I see that happen. I can't speak to Desjardins specifically, but I know that even my friends in Congress, folks that I respect and love deeply, the longer you're there, the more comfortable you are. And you know where I want you to be comfortable? At home. Because I think there's D.C. more than anything else inflates your sense of self-importance. When I worked for Jeff Sessions in the Senate, he would call the bureaucrats the masters of the universe, because these were people that thought that they truly were at the center of the known universe and they were making decisions for all of humanity. And there wasn't the circumspect humility that we would hope to see. It was, we just know, and we know what's good for you, and we know how to decide for you. And it very much at an early stage in my legal career set me against that. That I didn't want to be somebody that lost that touch, right? And we shouldn't want that for our elected officials. Jason said he feels the same way about Marcia. And the question is, can we find enough good people that want to run? And that's the truth. To Jason, Sandra, everybody on the Super Talk text line, well, you got to find some folks that are going to represent you well, that are going to shoot you straight. And I can tell you, just from being a columnist and radio fill-in guy, a lot of folks don't want to be shot straight. They want somebody that just tells them what they want to hear. And that's enabled a lot of politicians to have very lengthy careers because they just, this is what's happening in Congress right now. With the exception of Rand Paul. I'll use Rand Paul as a good example. He agrees with Trump on a lot of stuff, and when he doesn't, he doesn't. I respect somebody like that. You know why? Because it's weird to agree with anyone all the time. That's strange. I love my wife above all others. I don't agree with her all the time. Why would I adopt that as a political philosophy? It's nuts. But it's a lot easier for our politicians to just say, oh, what do you like? You like Trump. Okay, cool. Whatever he says. Yeah, I like that. I support the Trump agenda. I'm voting for the Trump agenda. Okay, cool. But like, I voted for you, and you're brain dead. You're giving me nothing. You're just a machine coming back at me with poll tested. I think you want to hear these things. I criticized Mo Brooks years ago when he was running for Senate because he couched himself as a fearless fighter. He was right on a lot of economic policy, but come on. These folks in Congress are not fearless fighters. It's their job to go hang out in Washington, D.C. and vote on stuff and have hearings where they talk. And we got to stop lionizing them, whether it's Trump or whoever your favorite is. We should want people who are members of our community that we actually know, who want to be known by us and don't hide from us. Yes, Jason, I see you. And this is the hard part, and I'll address what Jason's talking about directly. I've got a young family. I got 5 boys in my house. The idea of running for Congress and being gone all the time at a time that's critical for my kids is nuts. And I'm happy to serve. I want to serve. I love serving my community. I don't love getting on an airplane and going to Washington, D.C. I did that for years. And the kind of folks, a lot of times, that like doing that, don't really have much of a tie to the community. They don't want to hang out here. They want to go be important. And so it's kind of a tough thing to say, well, we want the kind of person that hates the job. But I think that's probably not too far from the truth. I think the most concerning candidates I've ever seen in my entire career have been people who elected office is the best job they've ever had. And that's a hard ask to go to people and say, I know this isn't the best job you've ever had. I mean, that's one of the reasons I trust Senator Haggerty. You sit down with him for 2 seconds, you're like, this guy is smart. He knows what he's talking about. And man, he could do a lot better than being a United States Senator, and he has. But he wants to serve, and it matters. And so I like that. I trust that. I know it's not the best job he's ever had. Now look down the political roster. Look at the folks that you're going to get on the ballot in the next go-round and tell me if it's the best job they've ever had. And if the answer is yes, then don't support them. If the answer is no, Brent said power should seldom be granted to those who seek it. Amen. I mean, we should want the George Washingtons of the world, the reluctant leaders who say, I don't really want to do this. I want to serve my country, and then I want to go back and go farm. And that's the kind of statesmen and stateswomen we should want. The ones who are like B-list celebrities drive me bonkers. You know exactly who I'm talking about. I don't have to tell you their names. You know them. And it's kind of fun to watch, and we get sort of egged on and say, yeah, let's do this to, own the libs. I don't want to own the libs. I don't want to own anybody. I want our country to be run competently. I want us to make good decisions consistent with principles. I want us to respect the Constitution. Like, those are all things that we should want. Yet we like a good sound clip. We want to be entertained. And so I fear that kind of where we are is we've got to find that happy medium. Somebody that's entertaining, that can engage us and not bore us to death, but also somebody who's going to tell us the truth that actually cares. And I'm telling you, those are hard to find. Those are really hard to find. 4632 says, we should do away with lobbyists put in D.C. to push agendas to governmental decisions. They should serve as ambassadors to speak on behalf of all the industries and go back to their office. No reason for the government to be taking bribes. So, in my experience, lobbyists in D.C. don't often bribe members and staff directly. Like, that's not really how it is. It's just the rubbing elbows, right? It's the, hey, well, we'd love for you to come and work with us someday when you get done on the Hill. It's not illegal. That's not an offer. But it's sort of this, well, we're close. We got to figure this out. We're creating opportunity for you. Can you, help us with our stuff? Because if you help us with our stuff, we want to help you with your stuff, your life and stuff. We're not going to write you a check right now, but that's how this stuff happens legally. So take that away entirely. Make it hard for lobbyists and expensive for them to do that. And then they're only going to do it on the things that are most critically important to them. Because I don't think you can get rid of lobbyists, because the Constitution protects your ability to petition the government for redress of grievances. Like, that's not a negotiable item. You could argue, well, we can ban it for pay. And then you can only, but then you're just going to have corporate officers doing the same thing. The bigger issue here is we just make it so incredibly convenient for special interests to leverage and lobby Congress. They just sit there. We send our representatives to them. They don't send their representatives to us. That's how this works. And we got to change that. And until we change that, we're not going to be pleased with the results. I support what Trump is doing with DOJ explicitly. Let's hack at the weeds here. Let's try to undo some of this federal expansion that's been done by executive fiat. But again, it's just going to take special interest in a new administration to undo all of it, to undo the undoing. They're just going to say, hey, we have this many open positions. Let's have a hiring spree. And guess what? You think they're going to put card-carrying conservatives in there? If this is the Gavin Newsom administration and they've got all these vacancies in the federal government, let me tell you exactly what's going to happen. We're going to have a federal government far more liberal than anything you've ever imagined. So without Congress and without additional action, all these executive orders are going to come back to bite us in the tail. I promise. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. Well, look, y'all, time flies when you're having fun, and we're about out of it. A friend let me know, too, and reminded me that we're talking about independence. We're talking about, hey, how does Congress think through some of these tough issues? But the truth is, they have whips. That title in Congress is literally like when somebody says whip the vote. Like, that's not gently ask, it's whip. It's, we need you to fall in line and do this. The Republican conference, I can't speak to the Democrats. I've never been in a conference meeting for Democrats. I have been in the Republican one, and I can tell you it's here's what we're agreeing to say about this. This is what we think the party line should be here. And so we're feeding our members, here's what you say, we all have to stick together or we'll get picked off. That's the mentality. And until that changes, until it's like, yeah, hey, we're on the same side. We want to support each other, but we need independent judgment, independent voices. We need real leadership. The truth is, much of the leadership in Washington, D.C. does not want other leadership. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's the party leadership in the House of Representatives or the leadership in the Senate isn't saying, hey, we want to raise up the next generation of leaders. It is, we're the leaders, shut up and get in line. And so it takes a pretty tough cookie to get up there and say, no, I'm going to do what I think is right for the people I represent. And if y'all don't like it, that's your problem, not mine, because I answer to them. It's much easier for most people to say, well, I'm going to send you some blah, blah things. I'm going to use my auto pen. You're going to get a letter that says, thank you for your thoughts. I'll keep them in mind as I interact with my colleagues and as I vote. You know how I know that? Because I wrote that letter 1,000 times. I wrote the form template. I did that. I don't even know. I'm getting old. It's probably 10 years ago. And I just told you verbatim what the closing line was for one of the members of Congress that I represented. Okay? So when you think you're getting communicated with, most of the time you're talking to a 20-year-old, you know, or some young staffer. Very seldom are you interacting with members, and it's the bigwigs, it's the corporate titans, it's the people who are quote unquote important, it's the influencers, the media figures that get their attention. And the truth is, we need more people that are just going to listen to us, who are just going to say, you matter to me. And so, like, tell me what you think, and we're going to call it a town hall, or we can call it a barbecue and brews. It doesn't matter. Let's figure out ways so that we have a better line of communication. I mean, I'd run through a brick wall for a senator and congressman that approached me like that and said, hey, I care enough about you that your opinion matters to me, and your opinion of the job I'm doing matters. That's so needed, and it's where we are. And 1733 makes a fair comment, and I think it's important even when I get detractors to read what they have to say too. Even though I don't agree with half of what you say, I still appreciate you coming on and find your insight interesting, and it definitely adds to the show. Well, I appreciate that. It's okay to disagree. The team mentality stuff is killing us, right? Some of you, I read your comments and your ideas, and they're freaking great. Well, not everybody has to agree with them, but if it's, I can't throw them out there, because if I throw them out there, I'm going to get kicked off the team, then we're never going to make progress. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of this whiplash. I'm tired of, well, this president and these executive orders. And on day one of the next presidency, this president and these executive orders. And it's just back and forth and whiplash. It's bad for our economy. It's bad for our country. And the only way we're going to stop it is we can get Congress to get off their tail and do their jobs. That means calling and emailing. I'll tell you, the most effective thing that I ever saw in Congress was when we were doing the build the wall thing and people sent bricks. I'm talking boatloads of bricks to Congress. It gets your attention. Finding the ways to shake some of these guys up. Maybe you don't need term limits. Maybe you get their attention and it gets done. I really do appreciate both Larrys on the show, Larry 1 and Larry 2. I don't want to besmirch the character of Larry 1, but I think we made it. We got it through today. Again, thank you for your time last Friday. Thank you for the time Monday. Go check out All the Best Words on that podcast. Let Matt and I know what you think. Give us some words that we can talk about next time on our upcoming episodes. This is Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show. Thank you for your time today. This is Super Talk 99.7.